Good evening and welcome to the Township of Woolwich Special Council Budget Meeting on January 20th, 2022. This is our fourth meeting and we look forward to a good discussion. Before we begin, I will remind Council that this part of the meeting is being recorded and live streamed to YouTube. I will start with a roll call of Council. I'm Mayor Shantz, I'm present, and I'm chairing this meeting. Councillor Martin.
Present.
Councillor McMillan.
Present.
Councillor Merlehan.
I'm present.
Councillor Redekop is having some troubles and will join us when he is able. Councillor Shantz.
Present.
Thank you. Start with the land acknowledgement and then a moment of silence. The land on which we meet has been here from time immemorial. People have inhabited southern Ontario for more than 10,000 years, and we recognize the Attawandaron, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples who lived here when settlers arrived and who share this land with us. May we learn together to care for and respect each other, our flora and fauna, and the land we inhabit together. Please join me in observing a moment of silence. Thank you. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, we will get on with things here. And before we dive right into the budget, I want to again extend my thanks to senior management and to their teams for all the work that's gone into producing this budget. I know you've been working since September and probably before, considering our strategic and business plans and our desire to provide good value to our residents for their tax dollar. And that's no small feat. So thank you very much for your work. And I also want to thank Council for your attention to the budget. We are a council that works hard and often comes at things from different directions. That sometimes gets uncomfortable, but it is our differences that lead us to good outcomes in the end. I trust we will again respect each other's positions, building on one another's ideas in a positive and collaborative manner that serves our township so well. We've had 3 productive meetings going over the budget at a high level, asking questions, and identified a few areas that we want to delve into a little deeper. Tonight we'll discuss those, give direction to staff so they can prepare a final budget for our consideration at the February 7th meeting. I am not going to go into all the areas that we identified because I am going to call on Mr. Petherick, and I trust he's going to do that.
Yes, thank you,
Richard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. What I was going to suggest to Council is if we can start to go through things. You know, there were a number of things I was tracking over the past 3 budget meetings. I think I started talking about them as we were going through. So what I think I'd like to do is kind of hit upon some of the ones that I would say are probably a little easier to deal with, and then start to kind of build from there, because that way we're not going to lose track of some stuff. So the first one was Council was looking to see what our potential 2021 surplus was going to look like. So while I can't definitively give you exactly what that is going to look like, but from an operating perspective, I think anywhere between $200,000 and $300,000 is quite reasonable. You know, as Council could appreciate, we're right in the middle of year end. I would even say we're still at the beginning parts of year end. Number of accruals that still have to be made. We're still receiving and recording 2021 invoices. And so from what I can see, I think, as I said, $200,000 to $300,000 is pretty achievable. A couple of comments on that. One would be, out of that, I think you're looking at probably 90 to 95, probably about 90,000 that's going to need to be transferred into the Ontario Municipal Board or the Ontario Land Tribunal, which is what it's called now. That's because we have the $100,000 that was in the 2021 budget. You know, we only spent, I think somewhere around like 6,000 to 7,000, I believe. So we need to put that into the reserve for the outstanding OLT tribunal appeals that we have outgoing. So really, when we're looking at that surplus, there's that we need to take off. I think one of the other ones I wouldn't mind having discussion with council tonight as well is with regards to our municipal drains. So we have a budget line in infrastructure services for municipal drains, and really this is our cost for municipal drains. And this is, I would say, save and except for what we would do in something like Breslau number one, which is a very sizable cost to the township. It's included in the 2022 budget. But typically we would have costs that I believe that about $50,000 is in the budget. So we haven't spent that budget out. I think we're about $45,000 remaining in that budget, but we are going to have some future drainage works. Amara Drain 1, I believe that report is coming to council. That tender report is coming to council very shortly for council discussion. So there'll be stuff like this that we, I think for us that we may want to think about putting that into reserve so we can actually use that for future years. So really that can, leave council with about, 50 to 150,000 or more. I'm hoping that it'll be more than that. But that's kind of what the surplus I'm looking at. So just really from that, one of the ones that we had from the first night from infrastructure services is Mr. Pupe made a comment in his safety budget under the external contracts for sign reflectivity that he would like to carry over that surplus dollars, roughly about 12,000. He would like to carry that from 2021 into 2022. What that would do to the budget, it would be a net, like a zero net impact. It would be adding $12,000 to the external contracts, and then in turn, we'd be taking $12,000 from the 2021 surplus. So we'd be kind of taking it as an interfund transfer. So I'm going to stop at that one and just kind of gauge council's opinion on that. And even if council has any questions on the projected surplus for 2021.
So just to see if I understood you correctly, you said there's a surplus between 200,000 and 300,000, but if we did the things that you were suggesting, we would take off 90,000.
Yep.
Municipal drains. No, 90,000 for OLT.
Correct.
45,000 for municipal drains.
Correct.
And 21,000 for the reflectivity signs.
12.
Thank you. I got my numbers backwards. Okay. I'm not dyslexic, but maybe I am. So do you want us to take each one of those individually then?
So I would say from the OLT perspective, that has been a council direction from years back. That's what we do. Anything that is unspent, we put in the reserve, and for future expenditures. And we know that we do have a couple of outstanding appeals. And I believe Ms. Fries actually did talk about it in her development services presentation, that they are expecting to see some of these appeals come to fruition in 2022. Obviously, we never know exactly what that's going to look like. They have 100,000 in that budget, but I think with the appeals, we can easily exceed that. And that's what we'd want to put that 2021 surplus dollars into that reserve so that we can draw upon that if necessary.
Okay, well, let me ask it to council this way then. Does anyone have any concerns with those three amounts being carried over to the 2022 budget? Okay, I'm not seeing any. So then that would leave us potential surplus of anywhere from 50 to 150,000.
Yeah, and I'm hoping more than that. But
So
again, I'm just being conservative.
Yeah, I'm glad that you're conservative. It keeps us out of trouble.
And Madam Mayor, if I can, just to be clear, the only thing that we were looking at adding into the budget was $12,000. That's what we want to add into the budget. The other two we want to actually contain within reserves and draw upon it if we need to. and all of this will come forward to council in a surplus deficit report that we normally present to council in June.
Yes, okay. Are there any questions on that piece? Murray, Councillor Martin?
Murray's fine. The 4 people that we're going to add in June, are they being paid out of the surplus, or is that out of the extra taxation that we're going to get? Or at the end of the day, is it all the same?
So this is, we're still proposing, and of course, we'll get into the broader discussion in that the 4 roads operators are planned to be funded through the new assessment growth. So that's that new taxation. Yeah, because that would be the sustainable. I think if we were to fund it from the surplus, that wouldn't be a sustainable source for us.
Okay. Any other questions on this piece? Okay. Next.
The next one would be the discussion on Hope Springs, their grant request of $7,500. So I think as we started to talk about it last budget meeting, that we can remove the cycling into the future as well as the safety patrol because those 2 grants are not going to be required in 2022 because they're still carrying forward grant monies from previous years. So if we were to include the Hope Springs, that means we'd be looking for $3,613. Staff's proposal is to draw this from our special circumstances reserve. And the reason why I say that is because for a number of years now, when we had surpluses, and specifically when we had surpluses in our grants budget, and they would be the surpluses from the special assistance or the travel assistance grants, so they would be, sometimes like $1,500, those types of surpluses. We would put it into our special circumstances and would be able to have council draw upon that if they saw a grant that they saw fit to support. So there's about $5,800 in that reserve right now as a balance. So I think if council's willing, we can draw the $3,613 from that reserve. Still have a little bit left, but at least this way, we're going to be balancing ourselves out to zero, so it would be a no net levy impact.
Okay. Comments? Councillor Shantz.
And previously, have we drawn from that reserve, or have we just been putting money into it?
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, we've just been putting money into it. And as you can tell with 5,800, it's not like we've been able to put a ton away.
Okay, yeah, thanks. Sorry, I should have went through you, Mayor, to Mr. Petherick. So I would be good with that decision if council would be supportive.
Does anyone have any objections? Let's go at it that way. No? Councillor Martin, your objection is you were objecting to the total amount, right?
Well, the other night I didn't support it, and I don't see any reason to. And just because we have a way to fund it does not necessarily mean it's a good thing to support. We're only one taxpayer, and you take the money from someplace, we're short there then. I would have followed staff's recommendation that we don't support it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Shantz.
I guess being a recipient of that organization in the past, I think it's a good organization to support.
Yeah. Okay, I'm seeing 1 opposed and 3 in favor. So I think that works. And that then provides the 7,500 they were requesting.
That's correct, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Okay, what's next?
The next, I'd like to tackle the Woolwich COVID Relief Fund. So that's at $56,000 we put into the financial services budget in 2021, and it's still contained within the 2022 draft budget. And we've had some preliminary discussions on that. I would say from a surface perspective, and just looking for council's direction whether we still want to continue to keep it in that financial services budget, or whether council wishes to take it out or direct that funding somewhere else.
Council, what would you like to do with the COVID relief fund? Councillor Merlehan?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Shantz. I would just take it out at this point and not redirect it. So to start the discussion, we can start there.
Okay. Anyone else? Councillor McMillan?
Yeah, I'd support that.
Councillor Martin gave a thumbs up. Councillor Shantz. And so if we take it out, we will just, where will we put it, Mr. Petherick? Where would you suggest we put it?
So through you, Madam Mayor, I think if I probably heard the request of the comment from Councilor Merlehan, it would be literally just take it out of the budget, which means I would reduce the levy requirement.
Okay. Okay. I think you've got your direction on that one.
Okay. So just flipping between a bunch of spreadsheets. So I think still keeping on the operating side of things. Before we get into the roads, the 4 roads operators in the budget, Mr. Poupe had a comment that he wanted to see if council would like to have a discussion, or he's looking for council's feedback on the tree planting in boulevards. And I don't know if Mr. Poupe has any further comment to that to guide council's discussion.
Mr.
Thank
Poupe,
you.
do you want to start us off?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Petherick and Mayor Shantz. Through you to council, I guess we came across a unique situation this year through our tree planting program, where we had some opposition to receiving trees in the boulevard. And I think what staff are looking for, and what our position was, but we were able to defer the tree planting in this particular location, was an endorsement from council. Is this is part of the greening initiative. This is how we viewed it as staff, and boulevard tree planting is quite an easy exercise. Quite frankly, it is public space. And of course, we look at if there's utilities and if we can replant there. And if we can, then we would look to do that to try to continue with the greening of Woolwich. So I guess with that said, we're really just looking for council's direction on that. If council's in favor of that, to say that is part of the greening initiative, then staff will implement that. Of course, we won't plant a tree where it's not going to survive, but if it will, and there's no other reason that we can't plant it there, we would look to plant it in public space. Conversely, I guess council could indicate to us that if there is opposition, we could look to plant a tree in another location. And I guess that's kind of the direction we're looking for from council from a staff perspective.
Okay, I'll let Councillor Martin start, and then Councillor Merlehan and Councillor McMillan.
Thank you. Through you to the rest of you. I think we're speaking about 2 different things here. If we go into a new subdivision, we put trees in boulevards and we require trees. In the case where you're talking about whether it's opposition, it's probably a 24-year-old subdivision. And some people did not want it for the simple reason that what they have planted already has grown, and some of them aren't in the right place. They put new driveways in and sidewalks and landscaping, and they know what kind of view they want from the street. And by dumping a tree in there might not be good. For myself, I'm opposed to boulevard trees, as you know, because they ruin the sidewalks. They left them all the time. On my particular street, they've been in 3 times to grind off the high spots. Now they hold water every time you get mild weather, and all we've got is icy sidewalks because the sidewalk slabs are not in the proper place. I know you claim that it's public space. Well, let's look at that. That might be true. But when we had Boulevard trees last year and we had all problems with chips and moss or whatever, all of a sudden they were the homeowners' trees. The township did nothing to spray them or take care of them. They did a real poor job when they took out the dead trees. They didn't take out the roots. And a lot of people had to work hard to dig out roots, and I'm not talking wee little ones. I'm talking roots 4 and 5 inches in diameter, and the township did nothing. And there's some people upset about that and have decided they don't want trees. And as I suggested before, Jared, if you would have just knocked on every door and asked those people, we wouldn't be into this. There's some people that want 2 trees that haven't had trees before. There's others that don't want any, and I think that should be respected. Like when it comes, when it comes to the boulevard being public space, that's true. But who maintains it? It's the homeowner. If I take 15 minutes for cutting lawn every year, or each time I cut it once a week for the year, my fertilizing, weed control, everything else I do, in the time that I'm there, you owe me $3,900 if I want to cost it out. But no, I've done all that and you saved your property. So I think it's up to the homeowner, and there's lots of other places you can plant trees, and we don't have to upset a lot of people by it. And I know you talk about greening. I'll mention one other thing. My son, he wanted 2 trees on First Street. He's got a big boulevard, and he got every reason in the world why he can't have any. He offered to buy a tree. No, we can't do that. It's too close to light standard, too close to this. And he went out and measured a number of places where trees were a lot closer than he was. So finally, they decided, we'll give you 2 trees, but they will be small. So if you're serious about greening, he should have had 2 trees of good size like everybody else. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay. Councilor Merlehan.
Yeah, thank you. Through you to Jared, I guess. I was just going to ask, clearly Councilor Martin has more information than I do. I don't know about the rest of council. I'm not super familiar with all the objections to boulevard trees. I understand some of the issues there that Councilor Martin just raised, but can you be more specific on where we're talking and what the objection is by these people? I don't know, was there a report that I was supposed to read? Because I didn't see anything, and I haven't heard anything about this issue until the last time you said there was an issue, and I thought we would get briefed on, what the concerns were. So could you do that?
Sure. Through you, Mayor Shantz, to Councilor Merlehan. There was an email, I think, sent to council with some information about discussing this at budget time. The boulevard space would simply be from the curb to the street line, which is the common lot line between private property and the road allowance. That is the space we're speaking of. At times, obviously, there's a sidewalk in between. A lot of times that tree is planted between the sidewalk and the curb. We have made changes. I can tell you there are large stature, medium stature, and small stature trees. Boulevards are not conducive for large stature trees. As Councillor Martin indicates, you can have a lot of problems with large stature trees, heaving sidewalks and so forth. So there has been a lot of, work or investigations by other municipalities that we can benefit from on looking to plant more appropriate trees if we are going to plant in boulevards. Large stature obviously give greater health benefits to people, and large statures would be planted in park areas or larger open spaces, and those are important. So what we had come across is we come across a subdivision that unfortunately had a number of ash trees planted. It's another change, of course, that occurs. We don't plant one specific species of tree any longer in a neighborhood. We look to mix it up. We had the unfortunate of the emerald ash borer has decimated a lot of our native trees. And this was a location where the emerald ash borer had done its damage, and we were looking to remove trees in that instance. And to Councillor Martin's point, there were other people who had spent time planting trees of their own volition on their own properties, and were not interested in a secondary tree of a different species or anything planted within the boulevard. And that's where we were able to shift gears. It wasn't, we had other locations to plant. We have a number of deficient areas that we would say where we have gone in and removed public trees and replaced and have removed them, but yet to replace them. And again, I think Councillor Martin's correct in that it is public space, and we do have bylaws in place that do require private residents to look after the boulevard space. So I think that sort of summarizes a bit of that discussion. But there was nothing other than staff really looking to see what is council's appetite or what's their mandate with respect to the boulevard space when we have a situation like that, an older subdivision, trees are needing to come down for whatever reason. And then of course we look to replant. Typically Township is whenever we take one tree down, we look to replant with two. That's typically how we've dealt with removals and replacements. And of course, there are a lot of spaces that the Township has that we could plant trees on. It doesn't have to be boulevards, but we were looking for more. That's kind of been our approach. I guess the other piece I would add was it is pretty commonplace, and I appreciate that it depends on what contractor you get and the oversight you provide on the removal of the tree. But grinding of a stump typically just does that, is grinds it down. It should be below grade so that you can promote topsoil and sod. If it's not, that is the deficient removal. And I appreciate that that has happened in the past, but it should be below grade, and then you can address it with sod. We do not look to dig out roots or anything to that effect. That would be far too labor intensive, unfortunately.
Okay, thanks for the update. I guess my initial reaction to this is, you know, when you're planting trees, we're not planting them really for the people right now. We're planting these trees for the people 40 years from now and more. I mean, these little twigs that are going in aren't, you know, the benefits aren't going to be immediate. That's for long term. Home ownership, you know, there's a start and an end date to owning that home, and then somebody else is going to be occupying that space. What do you do when somebody moves? The person had said, I don't want a boulevard tree. And then somebody moves into the place and says, hey, I want a boulevard tree. And then we go back and plant a tree for them. Or I just think it's a lot simpler if we just stick to the greening plan that we already have in place, and that people get a tree unless, you know, if there's some other big tree and it's just not conducive to grow a healthy tree, then I would say, yeah, don't plant it. But if it's just a homeowner that just doesn't like trees or doesn't want another tree, I think we should stick with our policy, and because we have a long way to go to reach 30% canopy cover, and we're not even close. So anyway, that's my comment for now. Maybe somebody will change my mind here.
Councillor McMillan.
Thank you, Mayor Shantz, through you. What percentage of people receiving a tree were unhappy that they were receiving a tree?
Through Mayor Shantz to Councillor McMillan, very small. This was the first time that I've been aware of anybody refusing a tree. And I believe on the street, and I don't know the number of people, but there might have been 2, possibly 3 on a street of maybe, I don't know, Councillor Martin would have a better handle maybe on that area, but it wasn't many. So very small.
Handful out of hundreds and hundreds of trees
Absolutely.
planted, there's a handful of people upset.
Correct.
Mayor Shantz, if you don't mind, just a follow-up. Thank you for that, Mr. Poupe. So I think we should proceed with the boulevard tree. There's going to be times as a council where we have to do things that people don't want us to do. There's going to be times where half the people want us to do one thing and half the people want us to do another thing. And no matter what we do, we're going to make half the people upset. I think if we can do something without upsetting people, we should. So my position would be that we should proceed with the boulevard tree, but be accommodating for people who don't want them. I don't know why we would pick fights with people when we don't have to. So if somebody says they don't want a tree, if it's one of those handful of people, we don't put a tree there. But otherwise, most of the people that I talk to are happy. They're ecstatic to get boulevard trees, so we should keep up with it. I do know I talked to a neighbor who was upset to hear that she was going to get a boulevard tree. If we don't have to upset people, I think that we should take that easy win and just not put a tree there.
Councillor Shantz?
Thank you. Through you to Jared. I just have one quick question and then, I guess a couple of questions. First of all, I live in Bloomingdale. What's a boulevard? And my other question is, after we plant a tree, who takes care of it? Does the township water it, or is it the homeowner that has to water it?
It is the, through you, Mayor Shantz, to Councillor Shantz, it is the homeowner's responsibility thereafter. There is a door knocker. There's a water bag that goes on there. So it's more an informational thing. And yes, it is the homeowner's responsibility ultimately.
Thank you. If I could just follow up, the reason I asked that question is because I think if a homeowner does not want a tree, they're probably not going to take care of it and it's just going to die anyway. So I agree with Councillor McMillan that if they really don't want one, we probably shouldn't put one in, but to proceed with what we've been doing in the past.
Okay, Councillor Martin?
Thank you. I failed to mention that on this particular street, there's only sidewalk on one side. So the other side has all kinds of room to plant trees that you can keep way back from the curb and that don't interfere with anybody. And in this particular place, there's only 3 or 4 people that have been vocal about not wanting trees out of 40 some houses. And I just think we should accommodate them.
Thank you. I think I hear a consensus that we should go ahead with the tree planting, but check with the homeowners. If they really don't want the tree, then, don't plant it. And I would suggest out of the discussion that probably new subdivisions, that should be just a matter of course that we plant the tree. Yes? Seeing some nods. Okay, is everybody okay with that? Yes, Councillor Merlihan?
I guess I'm just wondering, I mean, this isn't a lot of people, but I just don't want this to be all of a sudden a green light that goes out to people and we, it goes from a handful of people to, hundreds of people that don't want their boulevards messed up and like a nice green lawn and all this kind of stuff and don't want to rake up leaves and all that other stuff. I kind of feel like that, could happen. And I'm just wondering if you could, if that's something that your department could track just over time to see if that starts picking up.
Through you, Mayor Shantz, I think to Councillor Merlihan and the rest of council, I think the direction is clear and that's something we can easily accommodate. What we'll do on the door knocker is make sure that we'll send door knockers out when we're doing a tree planting program in a neighborhood, give them an opportunity to call us if they have a concern, and it shouldn't be too difficult to track and to see. But we would expect things to continue the way they have. Just a few people maybe not wanting it for various reasons, and now we have the direction we need. We can certainly accommodate that and move on to another spot. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Patrick, back to you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I can see Mr. Pepe is still on because I think we should still continue in his budget and have that discussion the council wants to have on the 4 roads operators. I did track that one of the suggestions from council was to have only 2 positions in the 2022 budget. Those 2 positions start in April, and then have 2 more positions pre-approved for the 2023 budget starting in January. So I did a little bit of work, just sort of looking at what that would look like for the operating budget, and at least from the labor cost side. And Carter McGuire, our operations manager, did some work on the equipment side. So if we were to go with that, you'd be looking at about a $49,000 reduction to the operating budget. But I would say the comment I would make on that though is while that would be a reduction to the budget, I think the thing that we need to remember is that we're proposing to fund this. I think I said this already earlier, coming from our new assessment growth. So it's not actually affecting the existing tax base. It's coming from the new taxes we're collecting in 2022. Which is really growth. And I think this is really what Mr. Pay has been speaking to a number of times, and even through his budget presentation, that these 4 road staffs are needed to be able to help us with our service levels. I would say that, and Mr. Coupe can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's been a big challenge for staff to keep up with the growth that we've had from all the infrastructure we've taken on from the subdivisions, and I think service levels have been waning. And I think really what this does is it actually allows us to offer the services that we should be offering to our residents from the roadside. So with that, Madam Mayor, I'll just hand it back to you.
Okay, thank you. Council, thoughts? Councillor McMillan and then Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Shantz. Through you, I think we need to put these 4 roads crew in as requested as soon as possible. I think when this report came to council, we started looking at ways we could get them in earlier, and then that was decided it wasn't, as necessary. So I would not be on board with delaying their start. I think a couple of things. When I started my term on council, when this council started, we did a tour of the yards work, and we were told we were understaffed. There was a commitment by this group to change that. And then there's been comments at the table about how, we shouldn't be understaffed because this issue has not come to this council. And if it had come to council, we would have fixed it. It's coming to council now. We have an opportunity to begin to address the problem, and I think we should. I think trying to delay this further is doing the opposite of what we've said we would do, which is put more boots on the ground. And so I think that we should do it right away as requested in the budget.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you. I agree with Councillor McMillan. This is at least 2-3 years behind. We should have had people before. Earlier in the discussion, I in fact suggested that we move 2 of them earlier. And I think the mayor had asked that question too, and was quite promptly shut down. But that's not a good idea. And all of a sudden now tonight, it's a good idea. They are short-staffed. And if you just take a look at the storm we had, it took 2.5 days to clean up. They were 2 men short because they were off. They had 2 trucks down, although they've got 2 spare trucks. And if we had even have extra help, we could provide better service. This is long overdue, and 4 in June is no problem. And we need to have them before the end of the year because there's a lot of training when you come to snow plowing, and you can't bring 2 people on in December and expect them to go out there and do a job. Snow plowing is an art. It's not just a matter of putting a truck in a gear and running down the street. And if you don't believe me, just ride with them sometime. So I'm all in favor of continuing with them 4 in June.
Thank you. Councillor Shantz.
Thank you. Through you to Jared. What is are there issues hiring 4 people at the same time, and or is that actually an easier way to do things because then you can do training at the same time? What's your view on that?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Shantz to Councillor Shantz. We've talked about this, both Carter and myself, and this is not an issue with onboarding the 4 staff at the same time. There are efficiencies, obviously, with training. You're going to stagger the training. You're not going to all send them at the same time anyway, but there's no concerns in our yards, or is provided that if we get the 4 staff with the equipment, we are very comfortable in onboarding all 4 at the same time. That's not an issue for us.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Merlehan.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mayor Shantz, to Mr. Coupe. Can you talk about the staff that you're going to be requesting in 2023 in the roads department?
Through you, Mayor Shantz to Councillor Merlehan. We haven't determined numbers, but I think we can certainly signal to this council at this time that we are looking to onboard more staff. Based on our analysis to date, the 4 staff would only bring us in line with one of the remaining 3 townships. The other, all the other townships provide the potential for greater service delivery. I think that's key when you do the metrics on staff per kilometer of road or staff per population. We lag way behind any of our 3 township neighbors. So it's not just those numbers. I think we want to figure out what our service deliveries are as gross impact too. We need to do a deeper dive this year, but we simply landed at 4 because those were the only dollars available through the new assessment growth. That's quite frankly where it is. We were going to ask for 5, but there wasn't sufficient dollars in the growth assessment to cover, and that's where we're at 4. I can't say definitively what it is, but I think it's worth prepping staff or council that we certainly will be coming forward with another ask in the 2023 budget.
Okay, thank you. Do you mind me continuing, Mayor Shantz? I just have through you to Mr. Patrick. The 49,000, is that that's the staffing, the staffing cost and the equipment cost, the associated equipment costs?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So just general comments on this. You know, when I suggested this last week, it was just I wanted to get an idea of how much it would cost to stagger. This isn't talking about not hiring the 4 because all the other comments that have already been said, I agree 100%. And when I only started looking at different scenarios because of the deficits that we're not even covering our costs in certain project areas. So we have to look somewhere for those. So what I suggested was staggering the hiring, but we would hire 2 people 3 months earlier than what this current plan is. And then the other 2 people would start right in January. And I understand that training is required, and maybe you get somebody who already knows how to plow or something, that would be great. But the staggering would only be 6 months from the original June date that was suggested. And then if in 2023 they're looking for another staff or 2, then you could stagger that for a June start or something like that, and then ease that department in, and then we have funds there to. I'm not saying to take it out of the budget, but to put those towards some of these other projects that we're going to go into debentures to the tune of, what was it, 3.75 million or something to that effect, and reducing those debentures that we'll have to make. And looking at the chart there of what we can expect in interest charges, that taking anything off of debenturing is going to be a major plus. Just looking at those interest charges over 10 or 20 years. So that was the suggestion. It's not about not wanting 4 people. It's about just staggering it. And I know onboarding, I know you guys want the staff so bad you would take them right, tomorrow. Onboarding staff is can be difficult, and doing 4 of them at once is could potentially not be great either. And anyway, it was about looking for staggering things to put money towards other things. And if council's not interested in that, that's fine. But that was the reason it's brought forward, not to say we don't need the staff.
Okay, thank you. So what I think I've heard is 3 people saying, let's go with the original request. And Councillor Merlehan suggesting we onboard 2 in May or so and 2 more in 2023. So do we need a motion to make it clear, or? No?
No.
Okay. I think the overarching consensus is that we are approving of 4 staff, and that the request to have them start in June, was it, Jared?
That's correct, Mayor Shantz, yes.
Yeah. So to go with the staff recommendation, basically. Thumbs up. Thumbs down. Thumbs sideways. Okay. I think there's general support for the staff recommendation.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So just to kind of continue on the last one in the operating side, I think before we start to get into, I would imagine some heavier discussions on the capital side. Comment was made for Recreation and Community Services to look at maybe reducing their budgets 2% on their baseline. And I would say that I was probably not on the top of my game as much as I should have been on that night, because it wasn't until afterwards I started, kind of thinking that I'm not so sure how staff would have been able to do that, because there are a number of things that are, I would say, more fixed costs. There are some salaries that are fixed. There are contracts that are already in place. There are utilities I know that would be difficult to start to reduce some of those budget lines. And I think for the most part, my thought process was starting to go along the lines of thinking, RCS, took months to develop this budget, and then to kind of almost like recraft it in a couple of days. I'm not so sure that they would have been able to accomplish that. But even that being said, even my mind was looking at a lot of times if you start to do on the expense side, sometimes then you have to revisit the revenue side as well. So those are just my comments. I don't know if Thomas or if he has any additional comments to that, but those are just some of the things I was thinking about afterwards.
Mr. Vanderhoff, do you want to add anything?
Through Mayor Shantz to Council, I guess just further to that, as we moved into the pandemic right off the hop, we were able to mitigate some costs through taking ice out in our facilities, taking pool out, that sort of thing. The most recent times being that we are reopening again on the 31st, which is exciting. We didn't do some of those same measures this time around. So we do still have our utility costs for the Woolwich Memorial Center, which is where we saw a great deal of savings in 2021.
Okay, Mr. Patrick.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, just to kind of tag on what Mr. Vanderhoff said, really dealing with the pandemic, I think, this has been one of the challenging things. And I think we talked about it, I think on my preamble, through the budget report, and then, through his presentation about trying to come up with what a reasonable expectation of a budget should look like in 2022. And of course, we didn't start 2022 the way we were hoping to start. We're hoping, from the signals we're seeing for the announcement today, that, this may just be hopefully a bit of a blip in that fruition of their plan from 1 month, if we can actually start to open things back up again, January 31st. But I would say that the two things, and I think I've said it before, one, we do have some COVID recovery funding that is available in I guess we can draw upon it in 2022. It's not, we do have some in their budget already, about 224,600, and we have 40,000 in the CIO's budget, and we have probably about 130 now, I think, left from that fund, because I think we're going to need it. Because I said before, there's going to be some advocacy, I think, to the province to try to help municipalities, with recreation, transit, social services. I think there's going to be an ask of the province, but I don't know what that's going to look like. And I think for us, having some money set aside that we can be able to help if our revenue targets don't meet, that would be, I think, ideal for us. But I think, the way the budget that has been presented, kind of sets us up a little better going into 2023, which hopefully by then we are actually in a normal year. But this is, I think, the big unknowns. And, as I said, I'll just probably stop there.
Councilor Merlehan, go ahead.
It's the first time I've done that. Yeah, through you, Mayor Shantz. Just again, my suggestion of, and yes, you're right. 2%. You can't do that on utilities and fixed costs and things like that. But I was going there because the budget was developed like 2022 was going to be a normal post-pandemic year. And we didn't start out with that. And even looking at the province's rollout plan, capacity limits will be still, a problem. We won't be at full capacity till probably after March. I think I only had a quick boo at the press release that went out today, but we won't be at those full capacities, and even if we looked at last year's budget, that was kind of a pandemic budget. Even if we roll back some of those non-fixed costs, I guess if the attitude, like if it is, well, we've worked months on this and it's too hard to roll back, then it's kind of like, well, why are we going through these? Why are we going through these line items and such? Then if we can't do that, anyway, those are my comments.
Mr. Patrick?
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, I think to Councilor Merlehan's comments, if there are some line items that the council wants to take a look at, I think that's definitely up for council's discussion tonight, and I think that's another good opportunity for us, during these budget deliberations, if there's something council saw that they wanted to revisit and talk about. I mean, now is the night to do that. I was already more so making the comment, from a broad perspective, as opposed to a very specific, if there were some budget line items the council was looking at.
Thank you. Councilor Shantz.
Thank you. Actually, I'm just checking my microphone. Is it working okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Through you to Mr. Patrick. I guess, or council in general, I guess when I hear that comment about being only at half capacity, that means we have half the revenue, but we still have the staff that have to work under those conditions. So our costs are identical, but our revenue is cut in half. Am I reading that wrong, or what would your comment be on that, Mr. Patrick?
Yeah, so to you, Madam Mayor, from the staffing level, I think both Mr. Vanderhoff or even Ms. Hornell may be able to answer that a little more. Even from I guess a utility cost, whether there would be cost savings because they may not have things open the way they would, or there would be time restrictions. So there may be some savings on the utility side. So as I said, I would probably think it'd be far better for them to answer those questions.
Ms. Hornell?
Madam Mayor, I just wanted to comment on the capacity limits. We are still waiting for the regulations to come out, so we're not 100% clear, but the indications are that we're going to be moving to half capacity in the facility. That mostly will affect spectators. So for instance, the King Games, the most we could get in at this point would be about 500 people. Pool at half capacity is still about 90 people. And we don't normally generate that kind of attendance for lane swims or aquafits. So those numbers are going to remain pretty consistent. Half capacity in the fitness center, we're still at 30 people. And we rarely would get, 10 or 12 people, more than 10 or 12 people at one time. So we're just kind of building back to program, but I don't think that our actual drop in program numbers are going to be affected terribly.
Jen, did you, were pool staff being paid in the month of January when things were closed? No, so there were some staff savings during that time. Okay, thanks. Mr. Vanderhoff, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I was really just going to echo what Jen said with regards to spectators and then savings with our part-time staff on the operations side as well too. We have had our staff unscheduled for the last few weeks now. In terms of full-time staff, that group is still working on both the administrative side as well as the operations side. And then with regards to utilities, really it's unique to the facility. A community center like Bloomingdale or some of our other community centers, settlement community centers, we will see savings in utilities. Buildings like the Woolwich Memorial Center and St. Jacobs Arena and the administration building for that sake as well too. Not so much because we do still have staff in those buildings and we are still running them, albeit at lower capacities.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Anyone else? Okay, is there anything you want to look at specifically in the recreation budget? Or anything further with the recreation budget regarding the cutback, the suggestion for cutback? Councillor McMillan.
I don't have a specific line item, just a general philosophy kind of thing. I certainly understand the desire to cut costs as much as possible. Last year especially, hopefully we can open up on January 31st and that'll be the last of it. It might be the community, it's definitely the community that I run in that I got a lot of these calls, but I got a lot of calls last year from people who were upset that our arena was a week late opening compared to Waterloo's arenas. And I don't think that those were necessarily, I don't want to say they were unreasonable, but I don't think it was taking into account all of the work that our staff was doing. But I think we were a week late opening because we were trying to save as much money as possible. And the City of Waterloo has a larger budget. They can bury some deficits that we can't necessarily. So I understand that, but I would say that I don't necessarily think that we need to jump to saving the most amount of money as possible right away. I don't know that I can understand that council sitting here when we're talking about raising the taxes to pay for it would want that, but I don't know that that's necessarily what our community wants. And I think that rather than let staff take the hit for being late opening the arena, we should take the hit and cover the cost of being able to open up quicker. So when it comes to hopefully we don't have to. Hopefully January 31st comes and then it's, pretty smooth sailing. But if it does get back to that, when it comes to balancing cost savings versus the ability to open right away, I think council, we should take that hit in the cost more than asking our constituents to delay having things reopen.
Can I just ask Mr. Petherick, just in general, so if we reduced the budget, say by 2%, presumably next January, when we're doing the 2023 budget, we're going to start off having to increase the budget by 2% to just catch up. Is that correct?
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, the line of thinking is correct. If you were to turn around and say already they're trying to build the budget back up to somewhat of a normal operating perspective, which I don't believe this budget actually reflects that. And if we were only looking just at the expenditure side, yeah, if you were to take off that 2% this year, you'd be looking at adding it back and whatever increases may need to be, due to inflationary or other cost pressures that our facilities and recreation may be facing with.
And what's the balance of our operating reserve? Or I'm not sure I have the right name for it, but.
Yeah, it's our operating contingency reserve. And just one moment. Okay. as I said, I opened up a lot of spreadsheets, and that was not one of the ones that I did open up. So I'm projecting a balance without any surplus right now. You're without any transfers in from any surplus we may realize in 2021. You're looking at a balance of probably about 220,000 in the operating contingency.
Okay, and the 2% we're talking about would be what kind of magnitude?
65,000
Okay,
in the recreation by itself.
thank you. Anyone else? Council? Does someone want to, I think I heard, I'm not sure what I heard exactly. Would someone like to make a statement or a motion that we can go ahead? Councillor Martin and then Shantz.
Thank you. I'm happy with leaving it the way it is.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Shantz.
Thank you. My comment would be if there was something in particular that we could look at, I would have a look at it. But if we're just using a brush and sweeping across it and taking 2% out, I have a hard time to try and figure out where that would come from. So without getting right into the details, I guess I would like to leave it the way it is.
Thank you. Councillor Merlehan.
I guess my comment to that is other years, previous council, I think if we said 2% or something on department, basically the staff would say, okay, we'll go and find the 2%, and that's happened in the past rather than us hunting through line items and then asking about each line item again. They would go and look at where things could be shaved, because none of us know what kind of cushion has been put into some of the line items, or that they beefed it up thinking it's going to be a regular year. So that's what I would say about it doesn't have to be 2%, but if we just hold on to this right now until we get through some of those other items where they're unfunded, I guess it's where do we get that money from? Do we just keep raising taxes then to make those other things come through? That's all I would say, I guess.
Okay. I think I've got 3 people suggesting we just leave it as staff have recommended, and one suggesting we put it on the back burner and come back to it. Yes, leave it. Councillor Shantz.
I would be willing to put it on the back burner for now, and we can do it in the final deliberations.
Okay, why don't we just set that aside? Mr. Petherick, can we come back to it?
Sure, absolutely, Madam Mayor. So next, at least from our list, and of course we can always circle back to operating, after we have some discussions. But this next discussion is going to be more broadly on the capital side. So the 2 things that were provided to council, and it's in the revised package for tonight. Council was looking at what some of the debentures would look like from a cost perspective, as well as what some of the repayments. I think I started making mention on it in the first night of what some of the repayments would look like depending on the time frame and the interest rate. So that was provided to council in a chart. I do hope that it wasn't. I do hope that it wasn't that small. It was a lot of information, so I wasn't trying to make it too small. I was trying to make it as big as I can for council to see. The other side of it that I did take a look at was some scenarios about compounding the infrastructure levy, and looking at different scenarios of percentages and looking at it from a 5 and a 10-year perspective. So looking at it over a 10-year period and then kind of saying, here's what you can kind of be looking at from a 5-year perspective and then a 10-year perspective. And I think that really gets into some of the discussions more broadly that council wants to have on the capital budget about debenturing requirements and the discussion as to what would be a level of debenture council would be comfortable with, what type of things the council would want a debenture for, and then as well as looking at some stuff as to what it would look like, a bit of a pay-as-you-go. And I think that's that scenarios of the infrastructure levy and what percentages would look like from that area. So as the capital budget does lay out, there are a number of things that staff have, and it is in the infrastructure services budget, looking at debenturing in 2022. And not to belabor it, but I think it's just at least a good review, just for us, so that we're all remember what the debentures are and kind of what we are thinking about or what the impacts are going to be. The first one was the Breslau Drain Line construction, about $1.1 million. As I said, through the budget report, I don't see that as something we should be looking at external boring, because I'm not so sure it quite fits from the perspective, because we don't have municipal drains as our assets. Therefore we'd be taking that as an internal boring. The greatest part about the internal boring is it is a lot more in our control as to the how and when and what amounts we want to kind of repay that. The other one is the $1.5 million, and it's specifically for the Field Street pedestrian bridge. And that is, and both of those would be the Breslau Drain 1 and the Breslau Wet Well, and my apologies, the Peel Street Bridge. Those two are primarily going to be impacting the 2023 budget. And then from the Industrial Drive as well, which is $1.17 million, and the North Sanitary Pumping Station, just over $1 million, and those would be primarily affecting the wastewater budgets in 2023. So with that, Madam Mayor, I would just kind of pass it back to council for discussion.
Who wants to start? Councillor Shantz.
I guess I would like to start with the capital on the bridge, Peel Street Bridge. I'm not in favor of debenturing that. And I guess I've got a written comments here, so I'll just go through those just so I don't lose track of where I'm going. So I guess if we only learn one thing from the Peel Street Bridge report, is that at the very least, staff need to present all the information in a way that council can make an informed decision. In a roundabout way, no pun intended, it was inferred by one of my fellow council colleagues why I would agree to debenture $8 million project and not a $1.2 million project. First of all, I would like to remind council that Mr. Poupet presented further information via email that suggests that a new bridge would be more in line with $5.5 million and not $8 million. Granted, a new bridge would require a higher debenture, but the structure would also last 3 times longer. Again, I refer to the email that was showing projection out 70 to 100 years, which is the useful life of a new bridge. The numbers indicated a new bridge would cost less. It's not about giving something to the Winterburn community versus doing nothing. It's about what is the best use of funds and giving something even more functional to the Winterburn community and beyond. We can do better. With the new bridge, it would not only serve the community of Winterburn better, but also the greater township community. This would include our Old Order Mennonite horse and buggy neighbors, the Snowmobile Association, vehicular traffic, including farm equipment, as well as pedestrians and cyclists. I remember receiving emails when Sawmill Road was closed through Conestoga because of the major reconstruction. The complaints were because the Peel Street Bridge was closed and the time and distance it took to go around. Imagine, if you will, sitting in a horse and buggy on a day when it's 20 below and going around, which takes considerably longer than just a few minutes in a warm car. Why do we want to make this closure permanent? But yet we receive a few emails from our original decision of replacement. Council decided to change their original decision from a new structure passed on February the 23rd to a pedestrian-only structure. What happened? We passed a motion that got changed without any new information other than a few emails. When I originally met with representatives from Winterburn, they wanted a new bridge that would serve the Old Order Mennonite horse and buggy community. That was a real concern for them. I can only surmise that the residents figured that council would not spend the money required to build a new bridge and they would be left with nothing. So I cannot support debenturing a $1.5 million with carrying costs stretched over 10 to 15 years for repairing a structure that is only expected to last 30 years. I have heard on numerous occasions we are just kicking the can down the road. This statement could not be more accurate here. In 20 or 30 years, this discussion will need to happen all over again for the council of the day. Should we close it? Should we repair it, remove it completely, or finally build a new one? I move that we defer this project until such time we receive substantial grant funding to help lessen the burden on the future budgets.
Did anyone, Councillor Martin, did you have your hand up?
No, I'll say something anyway.
Just a second though, Councillor Shantz, you said you made a motion. Were you intending that to be a motion, or were you were? I'm just going to ask Mr. Smith how we need to handle that. Need some time to sort through that, or?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I think I have a quick answer. If you're just speaking about the budget, then you could pass a simple motion that could take care of that tonight. If you're talking about changing a decision that council made during the environmental assessment process, I think that would be a larger process that Mr. Poupé might be able to speak to. But I think if you're changing the resolution that was passed on the EA, you would have to come back and likely reconsider your original motion, but I could provide more information if you wanted me to follow up.
I think if we can keep this to a budget discussion, that would be better. I know the two are sort of intertwined, but to the extent that we can keep this to budget, I think that would be better. And then if there's some other notice of reconsideration or whatever it has to be, then we could work at that sometime later. Yes, Councillor Shantz.
Yeah, the motion was for the budget. I didn't continue on with my second motion. So the motion was that we defer.
So the motion would be to remove it, to not include it in the budget. Okay.
That's correct, but I think Mr. Poupé might want to talk a little bit about the turnarounds at each end if we did that.
Okay, well, let's see where we land first with it, and then we'll target. I mean, obviously, we'll need to have something done. There would be some costs incurred to leave it as it is, but let's discuss the other piece first, and we'll come back to that. Councillor Martin.
Yeah, thank you. I would second the motion that Councillor Shantz put forward to remove from the budget, and we have further discussions later.
Okay, other discussion? Councillor Merlehan?
Yeah, when it comes to a vote, I'd like it to be a recorded vote. And as far as my comments, Councillor Shantz makes a lot of good points about the bridge. If you look at the bridge as the crossing is just a utilitarian type of thing they get from A to B in a shorter distance. But none of the suggestions with a new bridge keeps the heritage value of the Peel Street Bridge, and that's the most important aspect of this crossing. We do have a number of heritage bridges in the area that people like to come visit, and it's in Woolwich. We have some unique bridge opportunities that you can't find elsewhere throughout Ontario or Canada. So that is really the crux of the issue. Is it's preserving a bridge that's been there for over 100 years. And while this particular fix will be 30 years, there can be ongoing maintenance. These bridges can, as long as you want to preserve them, they can still be around. If you go to Europe and all sorts of places, there's, they have bridges that are like 500 years old and 1,000 years old. It's if the community is willing to, see that these heritage structures are still around, then it is worth preserving those, and that would be my argument. And really, your points are all valid. If you just completely take the heritage value out of it, and you look at the Peel Street Bridge as rusted up, junky looking bridge, but I think it does have a lot of value and worth preserving.
Okay. Councillor Martin, and then, Councillor Martin.
Thank you. I don't think those last comments are valid. If you recall, when we talked about a bridge, I talked about combining a new structure and the old to preserve the heritage value, just as they did in London. Secondly, I also suggested that we could take a section of that old bridge and maybe put in a field, put a plaque or something, and make a little parking area and access to the river. So we never ever overlooked the heritage value of it, trying to find out a way to do it that we could please everybody.
Okay. Councillor McMillan, did I see your hand?
You didn't, but I just think that like Councillor Shantz, Councillor Merlehan have gone back and forth on this respectfully from different positions. I know Councillor Martin has some connections with the community out there. This is an issue where there probably isn't a right answer. There isn't one easy right answer, and that's why, in my time on council, this is the issue that we've spent the most amount of time on by far, because I think there are good positions on either side. I don't think much has changed since the last time that we decided to move in the direction that we did. I respect that it's budget time. Councillor Shantz, Councillor Martin want to get on the record with their opposition. I think that makes sense. This is a big project, and all of council should be able to express their thoughts and concerns so that voters know where they stand on the issue and what was behind their decision, because I think this is one that's going to have some people on both sides. But I don't think there's a material change between what we decided on back whenever we decided on this and now. So my position is the same, and I hope that we can move forward with the bridges plan right now.
Councillor Shantz.
Thank you. I guess that's why I made the motion that I did. And the reason I went on with my rant was because last week I was asked why I would support one and not the other. So I had to really re-explain that, because I guess for whatever reason it got missed. So, but my motion is to defer the decision of debenturing the money for the bridge.
Okay. There is a request for a recorded vote on the motion. And so before we do that, since I will be required to vote, I would just like to make a comment that we did debate this very thoroughly and came to this decision. And so I stand by it at the moment. This is a budget decision. So in my mind, we leave the money in the budget. And, if something comes up before we get going further, that, if we get a windfall or who knows, it could happen. We can look at it further, but my vote will be to leave the budget as it is. Councillor McMillan?
If we approve the bridge and then don't fund it, does Jared have to pay for it?
Yes. Okay. Mr. Smith, I'll ask you to call the question, please.
Thank you, Mayor Shantz. Through you, the question on the floor is to remove the 1.5 million in debentures for Peel Street from the budget, deferring that decision. As council has previously requested, we will do a recorded vote in no particular order.
So just to be clear, a no means that it stays in.
That's correct, yes. I guess I should say, is everyone clear on the motion? Okay. So in no particular order, I'll call council and ask if they're in favor or opposed. Councillor Martin.
Yes.
Mayor Shantz.
No.
Councillor Shantz.
Yes.
Councillor McMillan.
Opposed.
Councillor Merlihan.
Opposed.
That motion is fails with 2 in favor and 3 opposed.
Okay, thank you. So thank you for the discussion, council. Mr. Poupé, I don't think there's anything further that you need from us on this.
No, Mayor Shantz, I do have an update I can provide council just on the project itself if council wants to hear that at this moment.
Sure.
Okay, so we did have a meeting today. I was not part of it, but what I was told is we are moving forward, obviously on the pedestrian conversion as was decided at the EA. It really does come down to timing. And when you look at the in-water works and with the specialty of Peel Street, we have been learning as we've been going through the Glasgow reconstruction work. It is specialized. We have faced some issues with supply chain. I know that's the new buzzword with COVID, but the difference that everybody needs to appreciate with these old structures are they are custom fabricated. It's not like you can just purchase a W-beam off a shelf. So there is time and energy, specific measurements on site. So that's something that we've come across, obviously, through Glasgow, and we are learning and improving. So with Peel Street, with all that said, all we want to signal to council this evening is it is likely that we are not going to be able to tender the project until later, probably in the fall of this year. So this is good news that if this is in the budget, we can do that. We don't need pre-budget approval. We already have budget approval. And then it could be up to the contractor of when they begin the work. Depending on the outcome of that, it still gives us another opportunity to tender again in early 2023. But the overall message is it will take the bulk of 2023 to complete the work, even tendering in the fall. I think that's what I wanted to signal to council. So this allows us to tender it this year, but the work won't actually be completed until 2023.
Thank you for that. Okay. Mr. Petherick, what's next?
Just a comment, if I may, Madam Mayor. I think from what Mr. Poupé said, from a logistical perspective on the financial sides, that would suggest to me that we would be looking at, if we were still to continue down the road of a debenture, that would happen in starting in 2024. That's really what, if I heard him correctly, to me, that's what that would look like. But I also would say, though, that also gives the opportunity, depending on how things go, that we may be able to look at the financing itself and see if there's other options, you know, instead of debenturing. But I think, as Mr. Poupé said, it does signal to staff that they can go out, complete the design, and do the tendering, and they don't have to come back and look for pre-budget approval.
Councillor Merlehan, question?
Yeah, through you, I guess, if Jared came back on, maybe he could speak to this. If we gave the bridge a heritage designation, that would probably open us up to some funding and grants and stuff, and perhaps more opportunity with the province, maybe for bridges. Can you speak to any of that? Is that something you have any familiarity with?
Yeah, through Mayor Shantz to Councilor, we would have to report back to see what that is. Our experience is that there's not a lot of dollars available, but it's possible. I mean, I think we would just have staff investigate that and see what is out there on the table and whether it would work or not from a timing perspective, plus what dollar amounts might be available. But we can do that if that's council's desire and can report back.
Okay, the Heritage Committee is looking to designate, to start doing the groundwork to designate the bridge this year. So that's one of our projects. So maybe the delay, I guess, in building will give us an opportunity to see if we can, you know, muster some funds somewhere else. And, you know, because I'm all for not having to debenture the bridge if we can find money elsewhere.
Mr. Petherick, do you have any words of wisdom on heritage financing or not debenturing, but grants that might be available? And then I'll get to Councillor Shantz.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, I can honestly say I don't have a lot of experience in dealing with any of the heritage grants that are out there, but I think, as Mr. Poupé alluded to, I haven't seen that I have seen. I haven't seen that they were significant, at least from the dollars that we're looking at.
Okay, Councillor Shantz, did you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I just thank you through you to Mr. Petherick. So if I, and maybe Jared as well, if I'm reading this correctly, then the motion failed, but we're still not going to have to debenture this year. Is that what I'm reading here?
That's what I heard.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, I think if we're looking at a fall tendering process, you know, then by all accounts, we would probably be, even if they started construction in 2022, they would, by all accounts, complete construction in 2023, which means we would be looking at borrowing the funds. Anything that of this that, you know, may have got accomplished in 2022, we would carry forward into 2023 and seek the full debenturing at the one time in 2023, which would have a 2024 start repayment date.
So can that line be taken out of the budget, or does it have to stay in because of the fact that that the possibility is there?
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, I think that the sentiment from staff is having it there at least has the expenditure, so staff can go ahead and have assurances that issuing the tender, they don't have to come back from a pre-budget approval perspective. And so I think Mr. Poupé can correct me if I'm wrong on that.
No, that's accurate. And again, we had to put a budget together, so it does give us something to work with as well. I mean, we're going to deal with the tender and then we can report back to council. Hopefully it's within the budget, but we don't know what exactly it will be. So I think that, to Mr. Petherick's point, it's important that we have a number in there for us to move forward with.
Okay, so the number will stay, but we won't have to borrow, is what I'm hearing.
That's what I heard.
Correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Petherick.
So through you, Madam Mayor, I think just now a broader discussion if council wants to have on you know, debenturing or whether they're satisfied with the discussion so far. I just had it as as a broader discussion in my notes, and just wondering if council still wants to have that, or it may not necessarily be in the context of 2022, but it may be something we might want to have at a future date.
Do we want to have a philosophical discussion about debenturing tonight, or do you want that on a future agenda? And everybody's frozen, so hopefully you can hear me. I can see Richard moving. Everybody,
Yes, I can.
everyone else is frozen. So if you want to say something, just turn your speaker, your mic on, and go ahead, because I can't see hands at the moment. Councillor Shantz.
Yeah, I guess could we leave that go to the end of the meeting tonight? Because there might be some other areas that we want to talk about.
Sure. Can we put that on the back burner after the RCS piece? Mr. Patrick, and I'll ask you, I'm really sorry. This is really difficult when you're all frozen. So Richard, go ahead and speak up.
Yeah, so through you, Madam Mayor, Councilor Merlehan did have his hand up for a comment.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Merlehan. Go ahead.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Shantz. I'm just wondering if, through you to Jared, I guess, if a couple of councillors were kind of concerned about 2023. Can you talk about the $6 million Breslau wet well? Just apparently there's some new information regarding that debenture for 2023.
Jared?
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mayor Shantz, to Councilor Merlehan. I guess the regarding debenture, specifically for development charges. So I want to be clear, I guess the debenture we have in front of council this evening for the 2022 budget is strictly what Mr. Petherick said was the levy components for Breslau and the Peel Street Bridge and the wastewater reserve account. So there is no debenturing shown for development charges. And then we move into 2023, and what we were signaling is critical projects that we feel need to move forward. Now, we know that we are only receiving approval for 2022, so we wanted to give a bit of a forecast to council to see what we could be up against in moving into 2023. The big piece there is the Breslau wet well construction has ballooned significantly. There are new requirements associated specifically with the emergency storage piece, which requires that you have to store wastewater flows for a 1 hour time period. There is not a lot of land. This was never contemplated or a requirement at the time that the Shirley Ave pump station was constructed, which is in the city of Kitchener. That's where all the wastewater flows go for Breslau. So this requirement now is balloon costs, and it's just going to certainly result in a series of underground pipes, network of pipes potentially. We're not sure yet. That's what we're working through an EA process this year so that we will have a better picture of what the construction will look like. But we have a preliminary estimate to the tune of about $6 million to be funded solely from development charges. And this is committed already. This is a committed project. It must occur based on subdivision agreements already previously approved for development in Breslau. So I say all that to say that again, in 2023, we do not have a debenture component for development charges, save and except the costs for the Breslau wet well. What we will be bringing for council's consideration shortly, probably mid-year, would be our development charges amendment to the background study. So that's good news in that we will be able to have a look at that, and council will be able to look at what those impacts are, and it will give us the ability to start recouping development charges for some of these projects. I'm hoping that's answering Councillor Merlehan's question, but that's the information I think I have.
Okay, I think the other bit that I was looking for was that that $6 million is probably pushing into 2024, and by that point there'll be enough development charges to cover that.
Oh,
is that
sorry?
What? Yeah.
I apologize. Sorry, through you, Mayor Shantz, to Councillor Merlehan. Right. As far as timing goes, we have been able to, with our flow monitoring program and and the way development is proposing to occur, it does look like we've got some time for the construction, and we are likely okay with 2024. We didn't intend to change the forecast though for this year, but it's looking like potentially in 2024 the construction would need to occur. I don't know that I could convincingly say we will have enough funds there. I don't know that it's going to be between 2022 and 2023. However, it does give us an additional year. I think that's the benefit, but without knowing the exact impacts to our development charges rate and the amount of build out that's anticipated between now and then, it'll be better than obviously starting in early 2023. It does give us an additional year.
Thank you.
Okay, I can see everyone now, so that's a good thing, I guess. Mr. Patrick, I think are we ready to move on?
Yes, Madam Mayor, and
Councillor McMillan.
Yeah, sorry, Mayor Shantz, just quickly, so the Breslin wet well, that's a development charge debenture, doesn't come off the levy. We can't increase the levy to reduce that debenture. And is that the only project on there that's a development charge? Okay, so of the 13.4 million that's listed here between 2022 and 2023, it'll actually be 7.3 million-ish over the 2 years. And instead of 4.8 in 2022, we're actually hoping this might get stretched into 2024. Is that it might be between 2022, 2023, and 2024. Are there other projects on here that we are expecting for 2024, or is that too far away to know?
Through you, Mayor Shantz, to Councillor McMillan. So everything you said, I think we'd agree with. That's correct. Your understanding is accurate to what we spoke to. No, at this point, it's too difficult to tell. So I think we're comfortable, and we weren't preparing to move that to 2024 at this point either. But that's just preliminary indications are suggesting it'll likely be able to get pushed.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Patrick, try again.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So before Mr. Poupé jumps off on me, I think there was still some discussion that council may want to have on the Church Street project and seeing if some of that can be done over 2 years and funded over 2 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, through you, Mayor Shantz, to council. Thank you, Richard, too. So this was this news came post us preparing the budget. What the region is proposing to do with the Church Street East reconstruction project is now separate this project into two separate tenders. They are proposing to complete the first phase in 2022, and that phase will include Arthur Street to just east of Duke Street. We looked at this, and I have spoken with the region on this. We're not proposing to adjust the budget either. And the reason is simple for us, is that all of the sewer monies are expected to be funded in 2022. And all that will be left over are a portion of the water and development charges to go into the second tender or second contract. So we're showing what we feel to be the total price, even though it's going to be broke out over two construction projects. There is no debenture piece here. There is no advantage, I would say. And we will be spending out that we're expecting to be spending out that 400,000 of wastewater. Our debentures this year, again, is our levy and wastewater. There is no debenturing in water or DC, so therefore no advantage to reducing the budget. Simply put, we will whatever is unspent in 2022 will just move over into 2023 is how we're envisioning this to work.
Councillor Merlehan.
Thank you. Through you to Jared. When you were speaking to the region, did you find out if this project being turned into 2 years is going to push any of the other projects? Because there's a whole series 1 year after another that's going to be happening around Church and Arthur for the next several years.
Through you, Mayor Shantz, to Councillor Merlehan. I don't know that they've 100% sorted out those impacts. They do know that the bridges are linked. And the reason that church is being separated is because of the Canacajig Bridge. The bridge on Arthur Street needs work too. So there's probably an economy of scale for them in that regard. So we wouldn't envision really it impacting necessarily that north piece on Arthur. We've also been able to adjust our Georgian High Street. We are still envisioning occurring in 2023. And we're working through some of those details with the region. If they're still going to focus on that second phase of church, that can still likely work, or potentially they may defer that to 2024 and take care of Arthur Street. So we don't have anything definitive yet. It's all preliminary discussion, but we are looking forward to another project team meeting on Arthur Street to get to kick us off in the right direction. So I think we can all get the information from the region.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else have questions on that one? Okay. What's next?
So through Madam Mayor, I believe Council still wanted to have a discussion about the Maryhill Fire Station.
Okay. Who wants to start us off? Councillor Martin?
Yeah, thank you. I guess I can start this off. And before we got any letters, I think Councillor Shantz and I had done some work. The one thing that we noticed that had changed over the last 3 years was $850,000 to 1.7 million. That should have raised flags with everybody. And I think most of us were invited to go to Maryhill. I'm not sure if everybody did. I went on Tuesday, and of course that was a bad weather day, and they informed me, I didn't have to come, but I said I like a little adventure after driving a snowplow 29 years. I didn't really mind going out. So I visited Maryhill, and it didn't take me long to discover, looking at the plans before Chief Carl even talked to me about it, I found a few deficiencies, which they have now. And the ones they have now, you can expect. It's an old building. There's more staff and bigger trucks. And when I looked at the plans, some of those things weren't even addressed, which bothered me. I'll mention one or two of them. They were going to have to back up their emergency van 4 feet so they could walk across in front of it to get to their bunker gear room. And you say, well, that's no problem. That's achievable. Yes, it is. But now you've got a foot behind the truck to walk behind the truck. And what do you have behind the truck? Mechanical, electrical room with their washer and dryer, and you can't even get in. Secondly, the main wall, they're talking about moving it 1.5 feet over, which still only gives you 4 feet between the wall and the truck. And I don't know what the height of the truck is, 11, 12 feet. And you expect people to wash the truck when you only got 4 feet. The poor guy washing is going to get soaked. And so those things weren't even addressed. So I suggested to Chief Carley that I'd like to see the St. Clements fire hall. And he said, hey, that'd be a great idea. And I said, well, you could set that up because you know the personnel over there. And to his credit, he had it set up by the time I got home. So then I called Councillor Shantz and said, hey, this is what we're doing. Come on. And he said, I'm sorry, I can't. I've got a meeting to take in because I believe he's acting mayor and he couldn't come. Well, the way the day turned out, St. Clements had 4, I would say, terrible calls. Most departments don't get 4 of the nature that they had in 1 year. They had them all in 1 day. So, of course, we were delayed going to St. Clements, which worked out perfect because then Councillor Shantz would come along. So we toured the hall, and I asked Chief Carley, are they missing anything? Is there anything that you see here that should have been done different? And he didn't think it should, or there was. So then we said, let's wait till the guys come back from the last call and we'll ask them. what would they change if they did it all over again? They came up with two things. The first thing was they wanted to see the truck bays about 6 feet longer. However, that will correct itself. At present, they're putting 2 trucks back to back. And within 5 years, they're going to have a 2-truck station, so they're going to have lots of room. The second thing was a big issue. They should have maybe put a dishwasher in the kitchenette area. And that's easily looked after because all they have to do is buy a portable one and set beside the wall where the cupboards are. And they're only worth between $450 and $1,050. So that's looked after. And so then I asked if we could get a copy of the drawings, and they said yes. So they are coming. They might even be here now from Wellesley Township. We can review the drawings, and this is what I'd like to see, and I would like council's blessing on it. I'm going to ask for a deferral, and when we talk about blessings, I have Council Chief Carly's blessing on that. And what I would like to see that we look at both a rebuild and a new and get accurate costs. I mean, our staff said a new with $500 a square foot. That's really ridiculous. And all the information we've got, we haven't found anything more than about $265. So those aren't accurate. And I think that 500 was thrown out there to make it look like 1.7 is a great deal. Well, I don't think it is. Even if we have to go or pay a little extra money, in the long run, we are ahead. And I think we can make a better decision. Now, I do have a wee little bit of experience between building new and retrofit something old. And I'll go to my son's house. He bought a house 5 years ago and needed a lot of work. Aluminum sliding windows, which were cold as can be, and a whole bunch of other things. And finally, the builder said, hey, you're looking at the same dollar value as a new place. And I think there was a difference of about $50,000. And so he tore down his house and he built all new, plus added a lot of things that he couldn't have done on a rebuild. Heated floors in the basement, bathroom floors upstairs are all heated. He put the best of everything in. And I asked him, I said, how much more did it cost you than rebuilding? Oh, he said he wasn't sure. It didn't really matter. He said probably $100,000, maybe better. But he said, what's the big deal? I'm going to be here in 40 years. And he said, by the time I move into my house, with the way the housing costs are, I'll have recouped that $100,000. And I think he's right. So I think there's some parallels between the fire hall and the house. And the thing that really jumped out on me is we're going to be here for 40 years. This fire hall is going to be there for 40 years and operating. And so I think it's imperative that we do it right the first time. I also heard criticism that our architect wouldn't meet with the people to talk about deficiencies. He said, I've got photographs that I don't need to come. With that kind of attitude, I would have probably fired him on the spot. But that's just me. I think we need to look at this and come up with a good decision. And I'll give credit to Chief Carly. He said, whichever way we go, if council decides it's going to be rebuilt, he said it will be a rebuild. I'm okay with that, and you won't hear from me. But please look at both options and see where we're at. And I think Councillor Shantz is going to do some phoning around today in the last day or two, so I'm not sure if he got any new information or not.
Thank you. I can add that I did some research as well, and I would, based on calling around to Wellesley and some other contacts, it sounds like $300 a square foot should be more than adequate to demolish and to rebuild new. So that is in line with what Councillor Martin just said. Councillor Shantz.
Thank you. Before I begin, though, I want to apologize for any confusion and misrepresentation that stemmed out from my comments last Thursday. I hope to clear them up tonight. I got an email. I think everybody got an email. Some people weren't very happy. I think that Councillor McMillan said it best last Thursday when he asked the question about, quote, sunk cost fallacy, that we've already put in all this work to renovate, and so we're going to keep going forward with that, regardless of what the new circumstances say, end quote. So yes, I did do some checking around, and I phoned a couple of places, like Councillor Martin said. I went and visited the fire hall in Maryhill. I went and visited the St. Clemens one a couple of times. Once I just drove by to have a look at it, and the second time I got invited to go inside, so I did that. Then I did some calling around from a couple of commercial construction contractors, as well as a fire chief that was in a different township. And I guess it's not in my place to divulge the numbers and present the cost per square foot I found out from those people on renovating versus new construction. It is, however, my position to make sure we are looking at all our options and spend our taxpayers' money wisely. When the Maryhill Fire Station renovations was first presented, it started at 700,000, and that was a quick figure a number of years ago, and then it went to 850, and like Councillor Martin said, then it went to 1.4, and then it was presented 1.7, just keep going up and up and up. And I think at that point, we should have stepped back and had a look and said, whoa, what is our costs on here? I asked that question way back when it was 700,000. Is it worthwhile repairing that building or building new? And I was assured that, yes, it was worthwhile to rebuild or repair it, and it'll serve the needs. But I think once we get that close to building new, I think we have to step back and have a look at it as well. So I think I would like to see us leave the 1.7 in there as a placeholder, and then come back with some more information as to what the true costs of replacing it are going to be versus rebuilding. So that would be my suggestion.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Vanderhoff, did you have some information for us?
Response to council. I guess first I should open up to we'll get all the questions on the table, maybe through Scott or Patrick have any questions before I provide some additional information for council. If not, I'm happy to jump right in.
Councilor Merlihan, McMillan, do either
My first question was going to be to hear from staff anyway, so I say go ahead.
Councilor McMillan, did you have anything to before we?
Yeah, no, I'm with Councilor Merlihan. I'd like to hear from staff and hear what they have to add to the story.
Go ahead, Thomas.
Perfect. Thanks for your response to council. So I guess staff would request at this time that council keep what we have in the budget in there and approve that amount. So 1.4 million, putting the 1.7 aside for the time now. And staff will do some further analysis and bring back a report on the 31st, as we had mentioned. However, for tonight, we would like to offer some additional information on costing per square foot for council. The township has traditionally completed our major recreation facility renovations and constructions through a design bid build process. So we hire an architect, and that architect designs the facility, manages the project, has a team of engineer consultants that they work with that can answer technical questions throughout the process, that sort of thing. They tender the project, and the project is then taken on by a third-party contractor who carries out that work, again, managed by the architect on the day-to-day, all those technical questions answered. We have done this for our last three major facility builds, so the Woolwich Memorial Center, Floridale Fire Station, as well as the Breslau Fire Station. Alternatively, there is the design build process, which is a process in which the township would retain a construction contractor who would complete the design as well as the construction. There are upsides and downsides to both processes. And one of those upsides for a design build process is that costing is often cheaper. However, what comes with that on the downside is a significant amount of staff time and technical expertise that staff here at the township do not have to manage a project of that scope on a day-to-day basis. That's the reason why we've gone through a design bid build project. Some of the benefits for that are, you know, you get to work through the design with the architect. Our fire chief, Dennis, and I have been at the table throughout that entire process every week. And the chiefs from Maryhill were involved in the beginning, in the first few meetings. They treat those to bring everyone to the table to get a sense of what people are looking for, that sort of thing, before we kind of shrink it down. So we have just a few core staff there. More control over the design and better management over the project through the design bid build process. So having said that, when we have looked at fire station construction projects throughout Ontario over the last 6 years, the 13 comparisons, or 12 or 13 comparisons that we pulled were, for the most part, design bid build projects. And we are seeing costing in the upper range of 400s and into the 500s, and more recently in the GTA, some of them climbing up into the $700 a square foot mark. Again, it depends very much so on the style of the building, whether it's steel cladding, very simple building, which is often what you may drive through, when you drive through some smaller towns in southern Ontario, versus fancier halls, brick and mortar halls, that sort of thing. So with that being said, those are the comparisons that we pulled, so that we had an apples to apples comparison. And when we look at a design build project, which is what's council was presented via email from a local contractor in southern Ontario, yes, the costs are cheaper. Staff would suggest that, and again, we're looking for council's direction on this, but staff would suggest that if we were to pivot with this project, there would need to be, well, one, we would be out roughly $100,000 in architectural costs that we've paid to date. Our tender does close in 60 days, it expires. And it was a very competitive tender at, I believe we received 9 bid submissions. So that would expire. And we would need to retain some form of third-party project manager to work with the design build contractor, because we don't have staff capacity to be on site every single day answering technical questions, that sort of thing. So that's what I guess that's what I have to offer to council at this point. We are hearing loud and clear from council as well as firefighters, and this has been an ongoing discussion with fire staff. What we wanted as staff, as project management staff, is to wait for the tender to close, see what the numbers came back at, and then have discussion with them. They beat us to the punch with communication to council, but nonetheless, here we are, and we are willing to consider pivoting if that's council's direction. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Vanderhoff, I have a question that's kind of troubling. It sounds like to go to design build is almost twice as much as a tender. And what I think I heard you say is design build was more expensive. You were saying design bid build, and so I was getting a little bit confused. We tendered it, it's higher. Design build would be about half the cost, or at least 3/4 of the cost. But we would need someone here to manage it, to be an intermediary, intermediary sort of person. But the cost to hire someone to do that would be how much?
So I'll kind of work through your analysis there, Mayor Shantz. We were hoping to reduce the tendered price from roughly 1.7 million, or I'll go by square footage, hoping to get that down to just over 1.6 through negotiations with the contractor. These are some discussions that we've already had with our architect. That would drop the cost to roughly $420 a square foot. And from some discussion with design build contractors in the last few days as well too, taking inflation into consideration, that sort of things, we anticipate those costs to be roughly $250 a square foot. And then your second, sorry, your final question, I've lost my train of thought here.
What would it cost to hire someone on staff to be that manager?
Yeah, so we haven't done this in the past, but we do anticipate the cost to contract someone out would be under $100,000.
Which is considerably less than, what have we got in difference? $200 a square foot, right?
Yeah, roughly
Just-
250.
Yeah. Okay, Councillor Shantz, thanks. Councillor Shantz.
Thank you. Through you to Thomas. I guess the question I would have is, if you have a designed build, are they not responsible for the job? And we have a building department that has a building inspector that would inspect the quality of the work and make sure everything is kosher as far as building. So why would we need a project manager on site every day for most of the day?
Through you, Mayor Sean. So I think that that is the intent, not often what happens. You do have a ton of questions and oversight that needs to be had, just to ensure projects on schedule. I think that even through a design build process, our fire chief could speak to some of the headaches that come with that process. We have been in touch with some of our neighboring municipalities, and I'll speak to the Township of Wellesley specifically, the project management staff there, and they did inform us that it was quite the onerous process working through that fire station in St. Clements.
If I could just do a follow-up, I've done a number of builds and renovations over the years, and I don't understand that, because if the design build, if they're there, they usually take care of things. And yeah, you have to keep on them a little bit, but I don't think you have to spend onerous time. But maybe this is a little different. But I agree with Mayor Shantz that it's considerably cheaper to pay somebody to do that than pay the upcharge on the square footage costs. So I think I think that you've heard our comments at this point.
Chief Aldis, did you want to weigh in?
Madam Mayor to Council, when we did the Breslau Fire Hall, some of the things that come up are there's everyday little design changes, little structural changes that have to be approved by the township, because it's an expenditure that comes out of the contingency funds. So that's some of the things that a project manager would look after for us on our behalf. So it may not be an everyday thing, but it's at least once a week, twice a week, making sure things are getting done. It could end up being every day. I sat through that Breslau build, and that's generally every week we had meetings, and we were constantly approving little things from them. So
I think there's definitely a role to oversee and make sure things are going the way they should. Councillor Shantz, I'm not sure it's a full-time, but there's definitely a role there. Councillor Shantz.
Yeah, but I'm assuming that there would be that type of attention that has to be needed in a design build as well, that you want to keep track of what's going on. So I don't understand why one would be more onerous than the other one, and maybe you can explain that.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Shantz. I guess it just comes down to the fact that you're putting all of your trust in your contractor, and that there is definitely a part to be played with some oversight to make sure that you're getting the product that they're promising. Whereas an architect would do that in a design bid build project.
And do we know what the percentage that the architect was charging for that?
Without looking back at the invoicing, we have roughly incurred $100,000 of 140. The majority of that 40 is for project management. So
That's
as I mentioned previously, we have not gone this route before. So we had some discussion today, Mr. Patrick, Brenneman and I, and we're not certain what project management costs would look like, but we anticipate under 100,000.
okay. Councillor McMillan.
Thank you, Mayor Shantz, through you. Last week, was that last week or earlier this week? Last week when this came to council, the question was asked, would the Maryhill Fire Department prefer to defer this project for a year and have a new building, or would they rather get on with it and get a renovated building? And we were told that they would rather get something new and get it going. It appears that some new information has come out. We have to approve something here with our budget. Can we approve the 1.7 placeholder and then allow staff time to figure out whether that 1.7 is going to be going ahead on this project for a rebuild, or whether that is going to be part of a larger project to knock it down and build a new one? But for me, I think it feels like council's getting into this too soon in the process, that there's some disagreement among staff, and if a consensus can be built between staff, then council can decide if that's the right decision at that time.
I think this has been a good discussion with council. I'm not sure that we're in it too early. I would suggest that the placeholder is 1.4, not 1.7.
Sorry, 1.4.
Yeah, just to be clear. And I believe we could leave that as a placeholder and do some more work on the project. Mr. Patrick, do you see any problems with that?
No, absolutely. Through you, Madam Mayor. I think at the very least, council signaling that they still want to continue to do something from the Maryhill Fire Station perspective. Comfortable with leaving the $1.4 million in there. We do have it funded. I think the only thing from a logistical perspective that I just needed to bring up to council, at least in this context, and I mean, obviously, as Mr. Vanderhoff continues to do some investigations, further information will come back to council. Just as Mr. Vanderhoff said, we have a tender that is going to expire from the perspective that the bidder will not have to keep his prices as bidded. So if we go down the road of doing a design build, we could run the risk that when you go out for competitive bid from that, it could be just as expensive. I'm not saying that the results, I think so far from what council has said, that's not going to be necessarily the case, but it could. And if it does, and you're not happy with it and you want to go back to this, where you're going to go through the retendering and it may be more expensive. I'm only bringing that out there just to make sure there's that full transparency perspective and just a fulsome discussion, not swaying council's decision one way or the other. But from a budgetary perspective, definitely keeping the $1.4 million in there, allow staff to continue on and do some more investigation and be able to pivot as council sees fit.
Councillor Merlehan.
Yeah, thank you. I guess some general comments at first. I spoke to Chief Carley and Tom May on Monday, and I was kind of disappointed with some of the information that they told me, which wasn't relayed to council earlier. Even at the last meeting, I'm not sure who asked it, but it was to Chief Aldis about whether the Maryhill firefighters were all on board, and we were assured that they were on board. For me, I wanted to see this project move forward, just because it has been a really long time since it should have been renovated much earlier, and then hearing about deficiencies and in even the renovation, I was kind of disappointed to hear about that as well. And then when it came to the cost and the square footage, it didn't take much to really figure out that this was significantly different, and I understand that there's two different types of builds here, and understand the staff approach. But you know, I think back to in my first year as being a counselor, we had the fire master study plan, which included the Elmira Fire Station being rebuilt, and the staff really wanted a brand new building, and both Ward 1 councilors thought that the spot on Howard Ave was the appropriate spot and to renovate that building. And they produced a whole bunch of documents and quotes that made the renovation very close to being what a new build would be. And the rest of council kind of went with that. And part of the quote was a roof that they quoted something like $450,000 to fix the roof for the renovation. We're fixing that roof right now for $100,000, and that was like six or so years ago. So to me, I'm a little disappointed that all this information wasn't provided to council in the first place, so that we would have all the information to make those kinds of decisions. And then when we get the information, then when you hear 500 and then or you find out that really there are other costing ways that we could have done this, you kind of feel like, well, why is staff not providing us this information? And there is an element of trust for me that when I hear these kinds of things, and I'm not saying it's purposeful, but there have been instances where this has come up, and it harms the trust between a counselor, anyway, I won't speak for council, and staff when we don't have this information. And speaking to the firefighters in Maryhill and being part of the process, it doesn't sound like they really were part of the process and all that much, and their concerns weren't addressed, and there wasn't any follow-up with them. And when you're having a building for that particular group of people, they really should be more involved with the building that's going to be coming out at the end of it, that they'll be using it, and I really wish that they would have been more part of the process in that, and I just wish that we had all that information. And just feels like, by not providing us the information, that maybe you either wanted the decision to go a certain way, or you didn't trust in council to make those decisions. And maybe that wasn't intended, and I'm sure it probably wasn't, but that's how it can feel being on the other side of the table when you start hearing from people at the last minute, and they're finding out the information through these meetings online. So I think they were just as much surprised at some of the information that was coming out. So that's kind of unfortunate. I'd be happy to relook at the whole project altogether, and I'm probably more in line with Councillor Martin and Councillor Shantz to take a look at the design build and see where that lands, and take our chances with letting the tender go.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Merlehan. I think there were a couple of things in your speech there that we can address at another time in terms of process and checking, have a discussion with staff regarding process. Tonight, we want to focus on the budget piece. And I think what I've heard from council is to leave the budget piece there, but that we do need to have a discussion with staff sometime very soon about the project and about how we go ahead with it. Is that a fair summary? Okay. Thanks, and thanks, Mr. Vanderhoff, for helping to clarify the different ways the project could go. I do think you know that it can be confusing sometimes, and so it's really good for us to have that total picture when we're making the decisions. Mr. Petherick, does that settle that one?
It does, Madam Mayor. So that is really the end of the list that I was keeping track of. But before we circle back or to some of the back burners things that we put off to the side, or any other thing that council may wish to discuss, I just want to kind of circle back and just recap the decisions that are going to affect the final budget coming forward to council, just to make sure that we are all familiar with what decisions have been made so far. Not a ton, but I'll tell you the impacts of them nonetheless. So last budget meeting on Monday, we included an additional $1,500 for the Woolwich Seniors Association and the grants perspective in the corporate services, with the offsetting transfer from reserve, and that was from the COVID relief money that we put into the reserve in 2021. Tonight made the decision to remove the cycling into the future, as well as the school safety patrol funding in the corporate services grant budget. And that was because they still had monies available from previous budget years. Then to include the grant to Hope Springs and $7,500. And then to balance that off by taking $3,613 from the special contingents, I would call the special contingency reserve, special circumstances reserve. My apologies, that's what it's called. And so that has a net zero impact to the levy, including an additional $12,000 in external contracts in the safety budget and then infrastructure services. And again, offsetting that with a transfer from the interfund, which will be coming from the operating contingency. And as well, the last one that does have an impact is the removal of the transfer to reserve, and that was for the Woolwich COVID relief fund at $56,000. And that has an impact of lowering the tax rate by 0.48%. So what we had as a base of 2.5 is now 2.02. And I believe I just got to pull it back up, and that means that we would be then sitting at 4.37% is kind of where we're currently sitting.
Okay, thank you. So that being said, we have 2 items yet to left. Is that correct, on the back burner that we need to address?
That's correct, Madam Mayor.
Okay, and the first one is, where do we want to start? RCS. Should we go back to Mr. Brenneman?
Yeah, I just wanted an opportunity, Madam Mayor, was able to take some time and reflect on council's previous discussion on this. And you may or may not agree, but I wanted to just throw it in the mix as council's having their debate on this parking lot issue, so to speak. I think you'll recall last week, when council was talking about their own budget, I mentioned to them, be careful with that. Be careful with making adjustments this year. Next year, we're going to have a new council. It's going to be tougher if you reduce it to build it back up. There's some elements of that I think council needs to consider in just making some, say, percentage changes in one particular department or area. And I think, in fairness, Richard touched upon this earlier too, and I just wanted to reemphasize it, is that we also have to think to the next fiscal year. And the fact that, yes, in any one year, you can artificially decrease, to certainly adjust the tax rate. And that's well within council's right. I've been in this business a lot of years. I've seen council make that decision for very much the reasons and rationale. And that's certainly in your bailiwick to do that. But I just wanted to emphasize that Richard had raised a point that I think I tried to stress on a much smaller scale. I realize there's not as much of a comparison between councils, but the philosophy is the same. If you adjust artificially in any one particular year, yes, it helps you up with the tax rate that's approved for that year, but it potentially sets you back for tougher budget deliberations, not just for staff, but council the following year. So just something to consider as you're debating things. Obviously, at the end of the day, there's certain objectives that you want to achieve, certain things you're concerned about in terms of, things we've talked about tonight around debentures. But I just wanted to reemphasize one of the key points that Richard had made and draw the parallel that I did.
Okay, thank you. I'm not sure that council was landing at an across the board 2% cut, but are there any lines that council wishes to look at in the recreation and community services budget, or are you happy to leave it as it is? Okay, Councillor Martin.
Thank you. I'm quite happy to leave it the way it is.
Okay. Councillor McMillan.
I think we're only 11 days away from basically a full reopening as far as rec services is concerned. So I think I'm in favor of leaving it the way it is.
Okay. Councillor Schatz.
I didn't notice anything specific that I could pull out and save that 2%. So I guess I would suggest we leave it the way it is unless Councillor Merlihan has something in mind or something specific. I understand what he's trying to do and the rationale behind it, but if I go down through the lines, I don't see where we can do that. Pull out those dollars off the top. So I guess without more information, I would have to suggest we leave it the way it is.
Councillor Merlihan.
It doesn't really much matter what I have to say at this point, so it's fine. Council spoken.
Okay. And what was the final item on our back burner, Richard?
It was the more fulsome discussion on, I guess, debenturing and a almost like I would call it a pay-as-you-go philosophy, from the analysis of the special infrastructure, or I would just call it special levies, and analysis of what it would look like from a compounding of, adding 0.51 and over a 5 to 10 year period.
Okay. So that doesn't, so that's the infrastructure levy you're talking about, right?
Yeah, through Madam Mayor. And as I said, I think it was just providing council with some scenarios, from a philosophical perspective, just so that, there's some understanding of what potentials could happen. And I think really that's it in a nutshell. But just to reiterate, we still have the 1.5% built into the 2022 draft budget, as well as the 0.85% for the green infrastructure climate action reserve transfer as well.
Okay, and appreciating that infrastructure levy is roads, bridges, and buildings, is that correct?
So through Madam Mayor, yes, infrastructure levy is for all infrastructure in the township. So that includes roads, bridges, buildings. It could be for equipment. I think we've used it for our self-contained breathing apparatuses for fire. It could be used for IT. It could be used for park infrastructure. So there's a number of things that infrastructure reserve fund could be used for.
Councillor Schatz.
Thank you. Through you to Mr. Petherick, I guess with all this back and forth, Do you have a quick handle on what we are actually talking about debenturing through the levy? I get a little confused what we're debenturing in-house, I guess if you want to call it, or self-borrowing or borrowing from ourselves, and actual debenture where we're actually looking at paying back in 10, 15 years or 20 years or whatever the length of time is. Do you have a number on that?
What's our mortgage going to be?
So through Madam Mayor, I think as part of my opening comments, I said in the infrastructure services budget, the Breslau Drain 1, that $1.1 billion, that is going to be internal. So that would be in our care and control. And again, I think the information provided council, was still in the broader context of treating it as if it was an external, to say this is what it would look like with various interest rates over a various time period. But ultimately, it is in our care and control, and council can decide how that gets paid back, as essentially, because I mean it will need to get paid somehow, some way. The council has decisions on the how and when that can occur. I think the other one still is with the Peel Street. We did have discussions that could be moving into the 2024 repayment period. And I think as the information I gave to council, you'd be looking at, and that is a levy cost, and that repayment could be anywhere between $184,000 to $103,000 repayment is potentially what you're looking at. The other two from the North Sanitary Pumping Station as well as the Industrial Drive, those are going to be born out of the wastewater operating budgets. I would say in 2020, starting in 2023, and in total, they could be repayments of anywhere between $270,000 to about $150,000, and those two debentures are going to be in and around $2.2 million.
And do we have any debentures on the book at the moment?
We do, Madam Mayor, and I wish I would have brought that one up, but it is contained in the budget report. And so we do actually have still a capital facilities program. We're still, I would say, not even halfway through that one. And we do have two roads that are coming. One actually just came due in 2021, so it's done. The other one is actually coming in 2022 as its expiry. But council also recall in the 2021 budget, we were also self-borrowing from ourselves $727,000. That was for, I believe, the capital paving program. And so the 2 10-year road debentures, one that expired this year and one that's expiring next year, that's actually what's going to pay that back. So we made that decision knowing that there wasn't going to be any additional levy that's going to be required because we already had it contained within the budget. And I believe the other one is water main extension in Breslau for Elroy Acres. But again, that's going to be an in and out for us because it actually is being paid for by the benefiting property owners.
So I think if I understand where Councillor Shantz was coming from, how much impact does all of this have on the levy? Is that kind of where you were going, Larry? Yeah.
Yeah. So again, in 2020, and again, I would caveat that too, assuming Breslau Drain 1 actually gets done and constructed in 2022, starting repayment in 2023. I mean, you're easily looking at, $75,000 to $100,000 that you'd be adding to the 2023 budget. So you're in the neighborhood of just shy of 1%.
Councillor Shantz?
Okay, I guess it's no secret that I didn't like the fact that we were going to have as high an increase as we were predicting, and I still don't like it. I was concerned and still am concerned about how COVID is affecting some of our constituents, and I'm not sure what kind of impact that actually has on some or how many that affects. But I also don't like the idea of needing to borrow money continually year after year. And when I saw the budget presentation this year and I saw the amount of debenture that we were looking at this year and the amount of debenture possibly looking at next year, it reminded me of the higher tier governments that just keep borrowing and going further in debt and never ever get it paid back. And I guess that's where I don't want to be. I don't think that's fair for my grandkids and my great grandkids. I think we have to look at that. So I guess having said that, this might be a surprise or a shock to people, but I think we have to look at the infrastructure levy and possibly increasing that rather than keeping it stagnant. And that way it will generate some funds for the future. I talked to Mr. Pethrick about this and suggested maybe we should have one for just a recreation, but he assured me that the infrastructure is all through the whole system. So I think probably going by his suggestion, I would suggest we just increase the infrastructure levy to help offset some of that cost. And I'd be open to talking about that and seeing what other councillors want to do. But I think, like I said, with the debentures that were presented this year, we've always, in the past that I've been on council, we've always had a surplus and we've always been able to get our work done within the amount that we have budgeted for. But all of a sudden this year, we've jumped into a different silo, I guess, if you want to call it that. And that concerns me. So I'm open to hearing from other councillors on that.
Do you have a magnitude of increase that you have in mind?
I was just, in my mind, I've spent hours trying to wrestle with this one, and so I would suggest let's double it to 3%.
3%. Okay, that's bold. Councillor McMillan.
Thank you, Mayor Shantz. Through you, Councillor Shantz just knocked me off my chair. I agree. I agree 100%. I think that for generations, money has been spent on infrastructure to create it without the plan to maintain it. And we're paying for that now. And yeah, it looks like we're increasing the taxes. We're not. These tax increases are coming from the generations past that built infrastructure without a plan to maintain it. And if we don't do this, all we're doing is punting that tax increase to people who aren't us. And we're asking our kids and our kids' kids to pay that maintenance bill that we're not planning for now. And I was thinking, asking for a 1% increase on the infrastructure levy was going to be way too crazy for everybody. But I think that 1.5 is the right number. I think we've heard about where we are with the infrastructure levy, whether or not that gap is closing between our costs and our tax money generation. And it's clear that the gap is widening, not closing. And hats off to the council that came before us to create this 1.5% infrastructure levy. It has put us in a better spot than we would have been otherwise. But 1.5% is not closing the gap. It's merely slowing the pace at which it's running away from us on. So I would support Councillor Shantz's plan to double the infrastructure levy.
Anyone else? Councillor Shantz.
I just want to apologize, and I hope that Councillor McMillan didn't hurt himself.
Was that a motion and a second that I heard? Maybe, maybe not. Okay, Councillor Merlehan, go ahead.
I understand the passion and the need for dealing with infrastructure. I guess maybe an advance heads up on something like this would have been, appreciated by me anyway, to be able to see the impacts of that. I just looked ahead to next week. We have a wastewater and water budget, 2.99% increase in wastewater is being proposed and a 3.62% increase in water. Those are gonna, that adds significantly to people's water bills, and they never get any cheaper. I don't think this is the year to start that. And I really think in the next year, if this is the direction we want to go, then we have to start looking at other aspects of the budget, and then, you know, be really conscious of and purposeful in saying that infrastructure renewal is a priority. Because right now, you know, you look at our strategic plan and everything's a priority, everything. And, you know, I don't know, I've pointed out a bunch of different areas that we could look at it, and not just this year, but for the last 7 years. And there's never been any appetite to, you know, if you want to go one way, that's fine. Can we go look at where we can deprioritize some areas? And I think, I just don't think, I don't think this is the year when we're already got a 4.5, almost 4.5% increase to make it a 6%. And then the increases in our water and wastewater, I don't think this is the year.
I would suggest that, you know, we're not going to do a final approval of the budget until February 7th. Is that the right date, Richard? Yeah.
That's right.
And if we were to approve that extra 1.5%, those funds would go into the infrastructure reserve.
That's also correct.
So we don't have to assign it to anything specific at this point. So whether we do 1.5, an extra 0.5%, or if we increase it in any way, it doesn't really affect what we've seen in front of us and what we have as our budget. So we can discuss it a little more tonight. I don't have a problem with that. But I would suggest that, you know, maybe we wait to make the final decision for a couple of weeks, just to give everybody a chance to sort of mull it over a little bit. With that said, Councillor McMillan and then Councillor Shantz.
Thank you, Mayor Shantz. I just wondered if Mr. Petherick had off the top of his head what that would mean on an average for an annual dollar amount on property taxes for the average property. Could you do that based on what, I can't remember what you said, I think you came to us with 4.85 and what that increase would be. I could do the math if you could tell me that.
You're muted, Richard.
My apologies. I can do that. Just give me half a second, because I am actually just looking at one of my spreadsheets, and that should be able to help. Yeah, so you would be looking at roughly about $55 for the average assessed value of $418,000. Which really means if you're looking at, you know, per $100,000, you're in and around $13. You know, so for every $100,000 of your assessment, you're about $13. You know, with
$13 as opposed to what about $10 if it was if it was the 4.85 that was originally brought to council?
Yeah, so right now, even with the 4.37 with the changes that council made, that would be just shy of $10.
So it's taking it from just shy of 10 to about 13.
Yeah, and that's a per $100,000 assessment.
Per 100,000. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's assessment value, not market value.
That's absolutely correct. And that, yeah, absolutely. Assessment values are very significantly behind market value right now with the pause and reassessments.
Excellent. Thank you.
Councillor Shantz.
Yeah, thank you. Just a comment on what Councillor Merlehan talked about as far as the water and wastewater going up 2.9% or whatever. And I guess I look at that as a user pay fee. And it's similar to a bag of milk or when you pull into the gas station, it's gone up well over that amount over the past year. So I don't think that's a factor in my decision. So I just wanted to make that statement.
Okay, thank you. Pat, you've also got your icon hand up. I think that's just left. I think you just hit it sometime by mistake.
I don't even know how to turn that on.
Okay, don't worry about it. I'll ignore it.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I don't know. I see what you guys are doing here. You want to, you know, it's less than a cup of coffee a day argument, which, you know, a bag of milk and a cup of coffee or whatever, at least people have a choice whether they want to have that extra bag of milk or whatever. When it comes to, you know, your water and your taxes and stuff like that, they're not getting a choice. And I found this budget, you know, a little bit frustrating. And I found myself even saying it a couple times where I was apologizing for taking a look at a number that was like $11,000 and saying that I was, you know, I don't mean to nickel and dime you on this, whatever. And, you know, I think when we start talking that way, I feel like the same way when I see at regional council and they'll spend $375 million on something and say, well, it's really only 0.08% of the original whole of our $1 billion budget. So that's really like nothing. And so when you start talking about, you know, we're dealing with bigger numbers now that we're in the plus 20 million operating budget, whereas when I started, it was 12 or 13 million. And now, you know, it's nickel and diming to ask where $10,000 is going to go, and I think that's a little bit of a red flag, because I mean most people out here, you know, in one of the line items that wasn't identified, it was found out, you know, oh well, we decided to buy a $7,500 piece of software, and it was just plugged in under GIS thing. And, you know, $7,500 piece of software. I mean, for my business, if I was making that decision to buy a $7,500 piece of software, that's a huge decision. That's really big. Here, it's like, you know, it's like, oh, it's the change in my pocket. And I think if we have this kind of attitude and we start jumping into, oh, it's only like $10 and it's only an extra 10 and whatever. But I mean, for a lot of people out there, it's an extra $10 for the assessed value of the 100,000. I mean, I don't know most of the assessed values. I don't know any houses that are 350,000 even in an assessment. But I think we have to think about the people that, you know, don't. There's lots of people in our community that $10 or $100 isn't going to change their lifestyle at all, but there are a lot of people that does, and even that extra $100 on the taxes, you know, and when you're walking around the streets, do you see you're getting more value? You know, and the region plays that game too a lot, and it's only this and it's only that, and every level of government does. It's only an extra cup of coffee a day. So, you know, all those things compound, and people don't get a choice once we make the choice for them. And I really take this job seriously. I take the budget super seriously. And, sometimes, I don't know. I don't know what to say anymore. I really don't.
Okay. Councillor McMillan and then Councillor Shantz.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Shantz. Through you. A couple of things. I didn't ask what the dollar amount was trying to say it's just a cup of coffee. I just did that because I think perspective matters. And when we talk about 4% to 5%, it's like, wow, that's a huge increase. And sometimes having the dollar amount, the actual dollar amount, is a different perspective. And so that's the only reason why. It's not to minimize. I'm not interested in minimizing the impact of this. I think, like Councillor Merlehan talks about, we need to understand how serious the impact of this is, and how serious the decision is that we make to do it. And if we do this, we need to be intentional about it, understanding that there are people that will be impacted by it, and we need to carry the weight of that while we make decisions. Mayor Shantz, when we were sworn in, you talked about the empty chair in the council chambers, and having that chair represent the people who don't have a voice. And I think those people are the people that Councillor Merlehan is talking about, that are impacted by that extra $10, that it's not nothing to them. And so, yeah, there's gravity to any decision that we make, and we need to take that seriously. You're absolutely right. Nobody's talking about a cup of coffee. I think you talked about, Councillor Merlehan, you talked about the going through the budget and looking at line items. I think there's a couple of different issues here. There's the operating budget that staff brought to us, and I don't think anybody got upset at any nitpicking. I think you talked about a $14 line item for some yard waste bags. That was funny, but nobody talked about nitpicking. I think that in my time on council, some of that scrutiny has improved the process that we are going through for our budget, and being more transparent with what is in line items and what's happening with money that we need for reserves. There's been some positive outcomes from that oversight and from that scrutiny. So I don't think anybody's questioning any nitpicking. I think that this has been the best process that we've gone through as a council since my time on council. So nobody's talking about nitpicking, but that's the operating budget. And I think when we look at the operating budget and an increase of, what is it, about 2.5 for the operating budget, I think that falls right in line with a pretty standard increase when we're in a really high inflation environment. So you're saying, to people, are you walking around and getting more service for that? When we're talking about the operating budget, that 2.5 is just keeping pace. So you're walking around the street saying, well, you haven't lost any services because we're keeping up with inflation barely. And even that requires some staff skill to maintain the services at an increase that's below inflation this year. And then you look at the 0.85 for the green levy. I'm in full support of that. I know you're in full support of that. You're one of the biggest advocates for greening and for being leaders on climate change. And now we're talking about the infrastructure levy, which is, again, completely separate from operating budget and a connection with, that service that you see walking down the street. We're talking about an infrastructure deficit that we know exists, and we're talking about the best way to close that. And I know you're on board with closing that gap, and you're talking about, is it best to take this huge bite now or take many smaller bites? And I think there's good positions on both sides of that. And I think we should have a robust debate as council about the best way forward, because I think we all do want the same thing. And it's just a matter of what's the best path forward.
Just a correction, Councillor McMillan, we started at 2.5 on the operating, and we're down to 2.02.
Thank you.
For 2%.
Are you getting like a bonus every time you correct me tonight? I'm keeping you on your toes here.
Yeah, I'm hoping so. I'll look for it tomorrow. Councillor Shantz.
Thank you. Through you. I guess I have to agree with Councillor McMillan, and at no way that I was comparing this to a bag of milk or a liter of fuel. I was making the point that those go up, and so does any other thing that you go out and buy, and that's a user cost, and that's what I likened that to. I don't like this any more than anybody else. You know that I don't like raising taxes, and I questioned 4.85 way back in the day, and I was assured from a number of counselors that that was no problem. We don't have any issues with people. They have no problem paying for that. When I questioned, should we be looking at the greening levy again and maybe taking that out? No, that had to stay in because people don't have a problem. They can easily pay for it. So I don't understand why something like this has changed. It's an increase just like other increases. And anyway, it's funny that at one point it was no problem and all of a sudden it is a problem. So I just wanted to mention that.
Okay. Councillor Martin.
Thank you. The question was asked probably an hour ago, how we feel about debentures. I'm a pay-as-you-go guy. You never get into trouble. But having said that, if we had a big project, something more than what we could handle in a year, and say it was funded 80%, the other 20% should go to a debenture. Doing a project totally by debenture, I probably have a problem with that. Whether we increase the infrastructure levy, if we used it properly, I probably wouldn't have any trouble. We have broadened that out, that we use it for IT, we use it for all kinds of other things. And if it was strictly for roads and new bridges and stuff, I would support an increase because that's where we're behind. But at the end of the day, we're not going to gain anything by increasing it because we're going to spend it on all kinds of other things. Now, I know there's different thinking of what infrastructure is. And I will tell you that probably a year and a half ago, I had dinner with 3 accountants sitting around and we had this discussion. And they all agreed that some of the things that we call infrastructure does not fit. When it comes to replacing stuff in IT and all kinds of things, those are general operating expenses, levy expenses. When it comes to roads and that hard infrastructure, that's what infrastructure is. So if we had infrastructure and we increased it 1.5%, and that's what we used it for, I'd probably support it. But at the end of the day, we spend it for every other thing besides roads and bridges. I actually say I agree with a number of things that Patrick said and his concerns. I think I raised that a long time ago when we first heard of the potential increase, and 4.85 doesn't bother me, don't get me wrong. It's where we spend our money. I had made the comment that on one hand, we've got a whole bunch of people holding out their hands and want this, and then we kick them in the rear end with a big increase. Remember me saying that? And I think sometimes that is what we're doing. I've also suggested that we look at things like the $100,000 in climate change, where we've got $95,000 sitting there, $70,000 for nature trail. Nobody's want to talk about it. So I'm bothered by how we look at things and we just handpick what we want to nickel and dime about. I do not agree with Councilor McMillan that this has been a great budget year. I have found it frustrating. I know there's years we had a lot better. I mean, if we don't make any changes, we might as well have passed it the first night and just turned around and said, hey, save the meetings.
Okay, couple of things, and then I'll let Mr. Petherick and Councilor Merlehan weigh in. We have made changes. We've reduced the operating by almost 0.5%. But Mr. Petherick, just wondering if you can comment on the use of the infrastructure funds, please.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. That's actually what I wanted to talk about. So if you look at the draft 2022 budget in front of council tonight, it is going for things that are infrastructure, and it is primarily, or not primarily, but the lion's share, the majority of it is actually the roads and bridges side. So it is infrastructure services that is taking the good chunk of the infrastructure reserve funding this year. The other part that is taking it is our facilities, and as part of that, we're talking about using some of this money for, I think, the Maryhill Fire Station, as well as other facilities. So they are, like, I would still say, the bricks and mortars, tangible, you can touch things is what the infrastructure reserve fund is being used for in 2022.
And in previous years, so for 2021, can do that in your mind, or is that not fair?
No, and I would say primarily it is. The only one that I think happened was just with, as I said, 2021. I think in 2020 there was funding for the self-contained breathing apparatuses for fire. Like that was the only major thing that we used the infrastructure reserve fund that wasn't facilities and or roads and bridges related that I can recall.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Merlehan.
You guys might want to remember this, but I agree with Councillor Martin on the infrastructure when it comes to IT for that special reserve fund, and even like paying staff and things like that. I've been a huge champion of that program. But the IT is definitely an operating thing that those machines depreciate, that you can write off every year from the government. It's not, when I talk to people about infrastructure, and my understanding to them is it's roads and bridges, and a facility like a fire station. Yes, that's infrastructure. I'm fine with that. But as soon as that fund starts, like, there was some report, I don't know if it was last year or the year before, that, we want to, have a staff funded out of that. And, I would have immediately stopped my support of the infrastructure fund had that gone through. It would have been, no, we're not doing that anymore, because it's supposed to go to projects. And I understand that there's some engineering costs that we have to do because we don't have those kinds of staff and they're contracted out. So yes, people are being paid, but I really think we should get back to the heart of why it was established and what it's for, and not make it, just start including all these other things as definitions of infrastructure. They are different types of infrastructure, and I think what we need to be concise about is it's hard. Roads and bridges, and people understand that, and that makes a whole lot of sense. And I think if we start branching out from that, it gets confusing, and then people would also, if they heard, they went and paid somebody and this and that, now I feel kind of like I was told one thing and now they're doing something else with the money. So I agree with Councillor Martin on how we do that, and I really hope we can get back to the core principle of that fund.
Sorry, can I just, Mr. Petherick just said that we've been using it for roads and bridges, and he only remembers one time where it went for breathing apparatus. So can we sort of get away from the sort of idea of we need to change what we're doing? Because I think we've been doing that. And I know we've had discussions about using, I remember one year we did have discussions about using it for staff, and you and probably Councillor Martin brought us back on track there. So just to be clear, because there's people watching, that we haven't been misusing those funds. We've been using them for projects, for roads and bridges, and true infrastructure as you've described it.
And I don't think any of my comments were misleading about that. But I just don't want that ever to come up again. That would suit me fine. As far as responding to Councillor Shantz and Councillor McMillan on the infrastructure and stuff, and this budget, I really don't know what to say. I mean, I do support the green levy. That's peanuts. What we're doing to go towards curbing our carbon footprint. And I think there is a desire in the community that we need to continue down that pathway. It's only going to get more expensive if you don't do anything. And as far as going further on the infrastructure, you want to do 1.5. All I'm saying is I don't think this is the year to do it. There's, I forget what the region came in with their budget was, but those are huge costs on top of everybody else. We're still in a pandemic. Any added burden at this point. Well, you know what? I'm not going to convince you otherwise. It doesn't matter. I came with a whole bunch of different suggestions on lots of different things, and I wish there was more contributors to the different suggestions while we were going over the budget. But that didn't happen again this year, and I'm kind of disappointed in that. So the budget's going to be what it's going to be, and we didn't whittle it down that much, or we didn't really add too much. So a success. I don't know. I wouldn't say that, but you guys think otherwise, so that's fine.
Councillor Shantz.
Like I said, I did a lot of thinking about this, and I guess the reason I am going in the direction I'm going is because if we don't go in that direction, we're going to spend that 1.5 and 2% on the debenture money and borrowing costs, and we're going to get nothing for it. So at least if we go ahead and do it in beforehand, at least we can spend it the way we want to. The other way, it's just basically flushed because it's a carrying cost, and that's what bothered me when I saw the budget and saw all the debentures, and then I look at next year and another boatload of debentures there. We're never going to get caught up. We're just going to be spending. We're going to increase the budget just to pay off the debt, and we're not going to get anything for it. So that's why I'm leaning in that direction. I haven't. I did not lean in that direction in the past because we had no problem. Well, I shouldn't say we had no problem, but we were able to meet the budget and have some extra money at the end of the day. So, but now we're talking about borrowing money, and that is where the 1.5% is going to go next year if we continue down that route, and then it's going to be 3% the next year, and we're always going to be behind. So at least we're going to get some money, something for the money that we spend. And I guess I find it interesting that Councillor Merlehan says that 0.85% is peanuts, and but yet he talks about other things that he doesn't want to spend money on. So I guess that's just a little confusing.
Councillor Merlehan and then McMillan.
Through you to Councillor Shantz. I really wish you would have made that argument right off the get-go. That's a legitimate argument and very valid, and I could be convinced by that. Taking shots at my stance on the Peel Street Bridge or the greening infrastructure, all that kind of stuff, it's not really relevant. I mean, you guys can, take your pot shots all you want. I don't really care. I looked at all those numbers, and before I forget again, I do want to thank Treasurer Petherick there for putting that the principal and interest scenario sheet together. I understand that would have taken a little bit of time to put that together, and I appreciate that it was done in such detail, because those were things that I considered. With the increase in the infrastructure, that was something that I initially was thinking myself, and decided this wasn't the year. That's just where I'm at. But I could be, I need time to think about it. So we'll have time, but right now it'd be nice if we just stuck to the budget and the issues, and instead of, there's always, Merlehan says something and then the arms go up so that you can come up with things to say against it. And I just wish somebody else would just come up with the ideas. That'd be great. So enjoy.
I think that was a bit unfair and uncalled for. Councillor McMillan?
No.
Yeah.
I don't understand. We're sitting here talking
Councillor
about the
McMillan.
idea that Councillor Shantz brought forward. So thanks for bringing the idea forward, Councillor Shantz. I had no plan of talking about a 1.5% increase tonight because I didn't think that there would be any support for that. Councillor Shantz brought it up. I agree. Like, we either do this money now or we pay the interest. And I think that 3% infrastructure levy is reasonable when we've known right from the start that's where it needed to be, or even higher to close the deficit. But Councillor Merlehan, I don't think that it's pointless to have a conversation. Councillor Shantz, brought that up. I am in support of that. But if you came and said, hey guys, listen, this is a bridge too far. I can't go that high in 1 year. What if we did 0.5% this year, take it to 2%, with a plan that we go 2.5% and 3%, and we phase this in over 3 years? Maybe you could convince me that I would go along with that. There is a point in having a robust debate about this. And I think that, this is the budget that we're talking about. And I think this is a really important conversation. We're talking about a significant increase. And there's a huge weight, like you mentioned, to that. We're also talking about huge debentures that we're trying to offset. So this is the budget. This is, the biggest conversation we've had, talking about the long-term ramifications and the actual dollar amounts. This is a significant high-level conversation that I think is a really productive one. This is what we're supposed to do, is debate and push back and forth. And my mind's not made up. And if you think that, I know that you're on board with closing that infrastructure gap. It sounds like you've got a different way that you would rather do it. My mind isn't made up. So I think that, having this conversation among council is important. I think that it is important to do this again later, when Councillor Redekop can be here. So yeah, I think that there is a point to putting good ideas on the table and hearing what other people have to say about it.
Okay, Councillor Martin, and then I think I'm going to suggest, it's after 9 o'clock. I'm going to suggest that we wrap it up. We've basically agreed on the budget that's before us, and we'll make the final decision on that extra infrastructure piece on February 7th. Councillor Martin, go ahead.
Thank you. It's interesting that we talk about closing the gap in infrastructure. I mean, that's noble. That's a good idea. But yet an hour ago, we agreed to debenture an old bridge and carrying costs, which is a poor investment to start with. And at the end of the day, when it's paid for, we're going to get nothing out of it, and we're going to have to start over again. So I find a problem with what we do on one side and what we're doing on the other side. When it comes to increasing the infrastructure, I've got an idea. I know that it was said that the Mayor Hill Fire Hall is funded. Well, it probably isn't, because if we get two prices, there's always a shortfall. We're always looking for more money. That is one place where I would increase the infrastructure portion one time only to cover the additional costs. Because that is something that we need, something we get value out of. And I don't think anybody is going to squawk to fund something like that, because it's needed in the community. Everybody else's community needs the same thing. That's where I would put infrastructure money and added 1 or 2 or 3% if we ran short there. Other than that, I won't support 1.5. Might get my arm twisted and support half, but I just like to see a better place where we put the money.
Okay. Councillor Shantz, I will, just one more, Colombo, go ahead.
Thanks. I just wanted to make something perfectly clear. I was asked to put a number on the table. I did not come with a number in mind, so I threw out 1.5%. That might not be the right number, but I think it garnered some conversation.
We'll discuss this again on February 7th. Mr. Brenneman.
Yeah, just very quick, Madam Mayor. You know, I've watched a lot of budget debates over my career, and you know, I know we can get caught up in different comments and observations, but you know, and there's been different perspectives on whether this has been a good budget year or not. I just wanted to add my perspective, which is council has, whether they recognize it or not, started to have more debates, you know, of a higher level of philosophical nature. While we're getting caught up in certain, you know, comments and observations, etc., right now on this particular issue alone, you're debating what you started last week, which was debenture versus pay as you go. You may have different perspectives about how you want to get there and the timing of that. No different than you had a philosophical debate about the timing of bringing on new staff and roads. It wasn't that anybody was necessarily opposed in the end with the addition, or nobody was opposed in the addition of adding staff. At times it's the debate about what can be afforded this year and can we make adjustments. So, you know, from a staff perspective, you know, I want to say that this has been an interesting year to observe because there has been more philosophical, higher level debate on a number of items. The only other thing I think that's important to note, you know, is that I can assure you, and I know Richard can back me up on this, that whether it's at a senior management level or, you know, the last 2 years, we've really brought into regular discussions at a high level, the managers and supervisors, you know, we do, you know, look at every particular area in terms of building the budget. And as I've said before in previous budget years, the times are no longer around where we're getting government grants every year for municipal affairs going up by cost of living. That was what that's what I lived through in the 90s or the early 90s and things of that nature. Right now, you have to certainly be clear in terms of the work that we do around the budget to be as efficient as possible. You know, and I certainly see that in all of the areas. And certainly, you know, certainly from a township perspective, we do not have the, you know, ability that the region does at their level to draw on some of the level of finances that they do, which makes our job that much more difficult. But, you know, I appreciate that it's getting late and there's been lots of comments and observations, but my reflection is, Council, you're doing a good job, at least, of even on this particular debate about trying to say, debenture or pay as you go? What is the fundamental philosophy that this council wants to go with and how best to implement that? So my 2 cents before we end.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Petherick, do you have anything to sum up?
Well, Madam Mayor, I think I've already kind of alluded to some of the changes in the budget. You know, I will put in the addition of 1.5 so council can have further discussions when the full budget package comes back to council on at the committee of the whole on February 7th.
Okay, thank you. Motion to adjourn to meet in regular session on Monday, January 31st. That's not council, that's committee of the whole. Right? Council? Is it? Oh, I guess so. Okay, yes, it is council on the 31st. Committee of the whole is the 24th. I have my time of month all mixed up, I guess. Can I have a motion to adjourn, please? Moved by Councillor McMillan, second by Councillor Shantz. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Thank you to all who tuned into the meeting tonight on our YouTube live stream. Council members, I'll remind you to stay connected on Zoom until the live stream has stopped. And I will say thank you very much for the discussion tonight. And I know we all have a few things to think about before February 7th. So good night.